Good evening. Hope everyone can hear. I'll try to speak as loud and clearly as possible here. So,
Not loud enough.
Not loud enough?
No way.
How's that? Is that better? All right, thank you. So good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, a little after, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to give introductions. I'm Larry Lehman. I'm the director of the Land Reclamation Program within the Department of Natural Resources. It's the Land Reclamation Program that is responsible for permitting, inspecting, and ensuring reclamation of our industrial mineral sites located throughout the state of Missouri. And when I say industrial minerals, I am talking about sandstone as the proposed quarry here this evening. Also talking about limestone and clay and sand and gravel. So within the state of Missouri, we currently have over 700 permitted industrial mineral sites located throughout the state of Missouri. And our program is based out of Jeff City, and like I said, we permit, inspect, and ensure reclamation of those sites. I first want to give a couple quick introductions as we're getting started. First, Bill Zeman over here in the white shirt, he is the unit chief of our industrial minerals unit. And I know many of you have sent emails or had email correspondence or spoken on the phone to Bill. So that's who Bill Zeman is. Then over here to my left, sitting in the upper deck over there in the purple shirt, that is Colin Priest. He's also with our land reclamation program. He's an environmental specialist, and he is one of the personnel that has been assigned and processed this permit application. So, also with the DNR this evening, we have a couple of geologists, Molly Starkey and Sherry Stoner are over there. They're based out of our Rolla office. And also with our Southeast Regional Office, or our office based out of Poplar Bluff, we have Brad Ledbetter. He is our Regional Office Director, and he has several of his managing staff here. We have them here because if there's any questions related to permitting or inspecting when it comes to water surface or air regulations, it falls in their category. So back to the Land Reclamation Program. And so we received a permit application here from Nexgen back in early March, proposed mine of a total of 249 acres to mine sandstone in the area. So whenever we receive a permit application, we review it. And once we deem that application complete, the Nexgen is required to go out on public notice. So anytime in the state of Missouri we have a quarry that is a proposed new site, or if we have a quarry that is expanding, or if we have a quarry that is changing the operators who will be operating that facility, they're required to go out on public notice. And what that public notice consists of is it's ran in the local newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks, plus your commissioners receive certified letters, plus landowners that are within a 1/2 mile of the site and adjacent to that proposed mine area are required to receive that letter. So I know that oftentimes there's questions that someone owns property that were within a 1/2 mile of the site, why they didn't get a letter. Well, it's the first tier landowners, the folks that are immediately adjacent to that proposed mine. That is required by regulation to receive that certified mail. So I know some of you received that mail, and obviously it was announced in the newspaper. And so if the department receives just one request for a meeting, then the operator, in this case Nexgen, is required to have what we call an informal public meeting. That's what this is. It's not a public hearing. It's an informal public meeting, and it's an opportunity for Nexgen to provide information, and then it's obviously an opportunity for citizens to ask either DNR or anyone associated with Nexgen questions regarding the proposed site. So that's why we are here this evening. Trying to think of a few other things I'm going to touch on. I don't want to speak too long because I know Nexgen has quite a bit of information they want to provide. I'm going to ask a few things. First, I ask if there's ever any questions or comments, please allow just for one person to speak at a time. And the reason for that is both Bill and Colin are taking notes of this meeting, and we also are recording the meeting. The reason why we do that is any information that we obtain during this meeting, what have you, we try to summarize it in a form that we refer to as Attachment 1. And that Attachment 1 will be included with the permit decision that is made in regards to this application we received. And that decision has to be made within 6 weeks of this public meeting. So it works well for us and for everybody that just one person speaks at a time. They have a question or comment. That way we get the information recorded. Plus, we can just adequately convey and answer your question. So another thing I want to address real quick, and that's most everybody is aware of, the local county ordinance that was issued this week. I believe it was on Tuesday. So we did receive the news release about that just today. We received a copy of the ordinance itself. And what I want to explain to y'all and let you know, so our state permit, our industrial mineral permit, is basically a standalone permit. It does not require local approval or any other state or federal approval. But that being said, is that permit just allows them to mine and conduct reclamation. It does not override or does not supersede or take precedence over any type of other local, state, or federal regulation. So basically, Nexgen is required to follow any type of local ordinance or other state regulation or federal regulation. So this permit, so some of y'all may be wondering why we're having this meeting this evening. This permit is totally separate from that. So if they're issued a permit, they're still required to follow any type of local regulation, any other type of state regulation. They'll be required to get an air permit, a water permit, any type of federal requirements with the Corps of Engineers or U.S. Fish and Wildlife or what have you. They're required to follow all those regulations. Any type of permit we may issue on the industrial mineral side does not remove them from any requirements. And so I just want to clarify that in regards to the local ordinance so everybody understands that. So that's why obviously we're proceeding forward with this application process and this public notification process. So with that being said, I think at this point, I think I will turn it over to Nexgen. I know they have a fair amount of information they'd like to present. That information may answer some questions and may generate some questions. But then following that, then we'll open it up to anybody who has questions or comments or just has any information they like to present, and we'll work with that. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Nexgen and let them start their information, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. This is a day that we've long been waiting for. As I have said, and I've probably said it in, my name is Roger Faulkner. I'm the
microphone, please.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Can you hear me now better?
Yes.
Sorry. So anyway, my name is Roger Faulkner, and again, I'm with Nexgen. I'm also a citizen here in St. John, and we've lived here in the area for about 35 years. About 5 or 6 months ago, when I was asked and this opportunity was brought to me, we started doing some research, and we've said that, so anyway, and then we formed our team, and when we begin to form our team, that's where we're at tonight, and I'd like to introduce that team to you. And when I introduce these people to you, I think they're men of high character. I think they're men with vision. I think they're men that will represent this company very well. And the first two that I'd like to introduce, I'll let you stand aside in just a second. The first two that I'd like to introduce is two people that mean a lot to me, and they are young men that I'm proud of. They are young men that carry themselves in a proper way, and they know what their yeses are and their nos are, and that's why I'm proud to be their partner, but also I'm proud to be their dad, and that's my two sons, Kyle and Corey. And then next, we begin to, when the opportunity was brought to us, they asked me to meet the two people that were already way down the road with this project, and so when we got the chance to meet them, they're very like-minded, and being like-minded is very important, and so anyway, and that is Aaron Baldrith and Bob Gerke. So us five make up the Nexgen team, and we have certain what we want to call maybe we have some expertise, and then what we have done is we put together an advisory board with men that have more expertise in all the other areas and all the other fields. So they will come and they will be sharing tonight with you. And what we want to do tonight is we just want to give you the information that we have. We want to give you the information that says to you that you know, this matters to us. And I've shared this story with a couple people, and I know people get tired of hearing of it. But when we went to Jeff City for the first time, and we met with the DNR, and I met Larry and Bill and Colin, and then I also met with a gentleman, his name was Drew Button. Drew Button is the head of the DNR in the state of Missouri. And as I sat there, and he had made a comment to me, and I told him, I said, Mr. Button, I want you to know one thing. I want you to know that this is very personal to me, and my son Kyle was sitting there, and I said, because this is just not another operation, this is not another business. This is our home, this is our family, these are the people that we have, my children who went to school with, and these are people that we see on a day-to-day activities. And so I want you to know something. What we're going to show you and what we're going to bring to you is not something that gets by, but we're going to show you something that we believe that will set the standard in the industry for what mining the silica sand that we will be mining. And you're going to get to hear that from a lot of different people tonight. So again, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for an open ear and listening tonight. And I, again, appreciate the opportunity to introduce our team to you.
Can everybody hear me okay? So, as Roger said, I'm Aaron Volrath. There's been a lot of talk about who the other partners are in this operation. Bob, Gerke, and myself own and operate Capital Railroad Contracting. We are based out of Columbia, Missouri, but we have a large presence out of St. Louis and many employees in this area. One of the concepts that I've adopted for myself and my team is when we bring somebody into our family, whenever I offer my job, I say, we want to bring you into the Capital family. So, by extension, our family is here as well. Anybody has any questions from the local people? What type of people Bob, Gerke, and I are in a business world or a personal world? Talk to these folks. They're around, and I cleared it with them. They will speak either. Well, they'll speak truthfully because they always do. However, please reach out to those guys and ask what kind of folks we are, what kind of company we run, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Two things that I really want to point out that's on your screen right here in the bottom right-hand corner. Missouri-owned and Missouri-operated companies. This is not private equity money coming here trying to take from the property and just leave you guys abandoned here. That is not the concept. We are Missouri-owned, Missouri-operated. We are two successful businesses that have merged to form, well, we haven't merged, but we have formed Nexgen Silica, which is going to operate independently of these two companies and will be a third company that we each own 50% stock. When we sat down and made this team, we had many conversations, but one of the things that we always talked about, and Corey's big in football, and so there's a lot of sports analogies that go along with it, but we had to have a mission. You know, what's our game here? So right here, guys, we want to share it with you. To support worldwide innovation by responsibly mining and globally distributing critical natural resources. And to me, the most important word in that statement is responsible. We want to be responsible in the way we do this. Okay, so we've got our goal. We walk through our core values as we determine anything. We want to determine how we're going to operate. Safety is a big part of what we do every day in our business now. I know it is in R&K's business. And if we're not safe when we're working, it's just not happening. So safety, integrity. I define integrity personally as doing the right thing, even though it's not always the easiest thing for you to do. So we want to operate in this world with integrity. We intend to do that. We have thus far, and we will continue to do so. Accountability. Do what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. I feel like if you do that, a lot of things will fall in place for you. And I can stand up here and read these, but I'm kind of trying to give you these core values in my life. Sustainability. We want to be environmentally responsible, and we want to be a project that is sustainable for many years to come. And philanthropy. We want to give back to the community. It does not do us any good to come to an area and to generate business without being there to support the community which we operate in. And then innovation. Innovation is a big thing of everything in this world that we operate now, and we want to carry that forward into it. So we're always going to be looking for ways to better. Okay, so with this, I'm going to let Roger kind of comment on this.
Technology. So anyway, these next three things that we're going to show you are a rendering or a picture of how we perceive the project to look from when you're going down 32 Highway. And what we really wanted to focus on was making sure that our project is aesthetically pleasing to the community. And so in doing that, that's where we came up with this, with the 30-foot tall high berms. We tried to put the stone in there that kind of naturally matches what is in the area there already. And so anyway, that's what you see here. If you're going down 32 and you look, you will not see a plant, but you will. This is what you will be seeing. The next thing is if you look overhead, this is the project. And the project, if you see the trucks will be entering, they will be coming in off of 32 Highway. And what we have done is we have designed it where the trucks never leave asphalt or permeable materials. And that way there we can have cleanliness. That way there we can control anything leaving the site. And then if you look about midway down, there's a wash bay, and that will be discussed. And that everything that leaves the site will go through a wash process, and then we will continue to recycle that water. It was brought to my attention, and I apologize. On the other side of 32, there is homes. There's 6 or 7 homes down here.
We just lost it.
We lost you.
Now, dropped out.
We got to reset it.
Harry.
All right, can you hear me okay there? Yeah. Okay, but when you look at this picture here, I don't know what part you heard, but when you turn off 32 Highway, all the trucks that will be coming in will be staying on permeable material, and then that way there, as they load and go back, we can keep the cleanliness that we look for. And then also, when we load onto the trains, you'll see that they go on the track, so we keep everything nice and clean. And then also you can see the aesthetics. It was brought to my attention, and we missed on this. There is 6 houses to the south, and we apologize for that if we misrepresented that. So anyway, but there is homes to the south. And then the next thing that you see is this is just one more picture. You can see where the railroad tracks and where we'll have loading out on where the tracks are. This is kind of our overview of what our plan is, our office will be, and everything like that. And again, trying to aesthetically match what is already in our community. And then also that we, if you look in the turn lanes that will be added on 32 Highway to make safety and traffic the utmost importance. And then if you look off to the right there, you're going to see the lakes that we will have there, that we will be able to reuse our water. So all those things, we just want to kind of give you an oversight of exactly what it would be.
One of the big things that we had to do as we developed our team, it obviously cannot be just Capital Railroad and RK. We're going to have to have a lot of help as we build this mine, as we deal with transportation, as we deal with all of the things. So one of the things that we first had to do was we had to pick our head coach. So we were very fortunate enough to get a gentleman by the name of Clark Bollinger. He comes to our group with 30 plus years of mining experience. And with that, I want to go ahead and take this time to introduce him. Clark Bollinger is our general manager. I think these guys are going to switch.
Everyone here? Apologize once again. Technical difficulties. Thank you, Roger and Aaron. My name is Clark Bollinger. Before we get into the program, the agenda, I would like to just give you a brief history about my career. Actually, I was born in Fredericktown, Missouri, not far from here, right? So I went to moved to Festus, my middle school, and finished out high school through up to beginning of college. From that point, I have following college, I worked in several limestone facilities around the Midwest, Martin Marietta, both in Kansas City, Indiana. I've worked in the sand, both underground and above ground. So for the past 30 years, I have a passion for this industry, and I've always been involved somehow in mining. So when Nexgen, this thing came available, I was excited. I was excited about this for a lot of different reasons. So with that said, I appreciate everyone being here tonight, and we're going to take you on a tour of Nexgen. So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about Silica. We're going to talk about environmental awareness, strategic site locations, community awareness, products, and at the end, we will take questions, okay? We're going to wait till the end to take questions. We will do it in segments. If you have a question about hydrology, I will introduce our hydrologist. He will come up here and answer questions consecutively about hydrology. And we'll go on down the line, okay? That way everybody gets a chance to talk. You can speak to each one if you want, or if you only want to speak to one of the 6 or 7, you can do that as well. So tonight we have, as an advisory board, we have Stan Schultz. He's a professional engineer. Keith Henderson with Buckley Powder. Ira Satterfield is our geologist that's been helping us work on this project. Mike Carlson is going to be taking care of our hydrology questions tonight. Curtis Hyder, air, water permitting. He's a consultant that we've hired to do both air and water for us. Jason Spangler with CRS comes from Wisconsin. He is the designer and builder of our wet plant for this facility. Troy Zickert is with HiChem. We're based out of Tampa. He will be here to speak to Flocculant. Ron Heap is with Tarmac International. Nexgen has chosen a Tarmac dryer system for our site. So Ron is here. He can walk you through the entire process. If you look at our advisory board, there's well over 250 years of experience that has not only worked on this, but has made recommendations. They've touched this project from every aspect. So this is not something that has been thrown together. There's been years in the making, or probably over a year, trying to identify what we wanted to do and best way to get there. So, all right, we're going to start out with environmental awareness. We're going to look at topography and watershed outfall. Stan Schultz, come on up.
This is why we don't trust the mine.
Zip it.
Okay, my name's Stan Schultz. Can you hear me all right? Okay, I hail from the town of Doniphan, so this is like a big city to me, so, you know, got to go out tonight. But anyway, what I'm here to talk to you guys about is about the overland flow of water, and when it gets into the streams, and how that's going to interact with our environment here. And we just got 2 or 3 slides to quickly touch on that, and we'll move forward. So give me the first slide. Basically, an important aspect to this, and I hope the folks that live nearby or have concerns understand, when rainwater falls from the sky, it's going to fall on our site, and it's always going to drain downhill. That's one thing I did learn in school, is water goes downhill. Well, we are going to be able to capture almost all of the water that we need to operate this facility on site through 2 retention ponds that you're going to see a picture of. So that water, not only is it going to be captured on site, it's going to be pumped back into the system and used. That's not saying that there won't be some makeup water, but for the most part, the water that falls from the sky will be captured and used in our facility. So this quote here is from the EPA, and it's talking about harvesting rainwater. So that's an environmental friendly way in which our process is going to work. Next slide. What this is, folks, is just a picture of the mine site, and what I want to call to your attention is these blue lines here. In the world of topography, water flows perpendicular to these blue lines. So you can see the way that we're going to grade the site out. Not only are we going to have a site burn that's 30-foot tall that we talked about at the highway, we're going to have the site graded so that the highest spot on the site is going to be the railroad, and we're going to flow about 2% grade away from the railroad, and we're going to capture the water that flows, either falls from the sky. It's going to be captured here. There's about 9 million gallons of water stored here, and then we've got a secondary pond down here for water retention that's going to hold about 3 million gallons. So 12 million gallons is a lot of water that'll be recycled through our system and returned back. So I just wanted you guys to see that the railroad travels through here, is the high spot that depicts the drainage basin for the area. And we're going to contain the water. We have easily, through our site work, we're going to be able to contain this water on site. Next slide. What this is, folks, is a very simple, basic drainage area map. A lot of the comments of concerns that I saw talked about the overland flow of water across Hahn State Park, across the Hickory Canyon area, and what I wanted to be able to show you folks, and I think the DNR has a handout that's got the drainage areas on it, but if you look, this is the Nexgen area, and the green arrows leave the site and form what's the headwaters of Establishment Creek. You've got the River of Voss here. This is Highway 32. We're at the high spot of the drainage area. The drainage goes to Establishment Creek. We've got River of Voss here, and then we've got the Hahn State Park, which is, I think, Pickle Springs is called. So an important aspect of this is groundwater or surface water is not going to flow anywhere that folks are concerned about the natural areas. So that's just a good thing, and if when this is over with, if you got questions, and find me, I'll be happy to talk more about it. Next question, next slide. If you would go back one slide, I want to touch on one more thing to the picture. One more slide back. There we go. So this is our phase 1 mine plan, and we plan to mine down to an elevation of 760. And that's not 700 feet in the ground. That's if you're standing at the ocean and you look up 760 feet, that's the elevation that's going to be. Our facility here is in the 850 to 900 foot above sea level range. So this just shows you 760. Just keep that in mind, 760. All right, a couple slides forward. Okay, so we not only want to control any water that hits the site, we have to follow a permit that we will obtain from the Department of Natural Resources. And the way that we contain water, clean up water, is going to be through a series of check dams and dikes and wattles and things like that. So we got a couple of slides just to show you what that is. And you guys are going to recognize this stuff as you see it, because you see it going down the highway every day. Okay? So this is what we call straw wattle. A lot of times it's filled full of bark or straw or hay or something, and it naturally filtrates any water that travels through it. This is a ditch check, and you never saw these things on the side of MoDOT highways. But if you go drive down new construction now, you see these ditch checks. At first when they came out, I thought it was just another thing for a drunk guy to run over. But it has a purpose environmentally, and that's to, not only does it slow the water down, it straps any sediment that's in that water behind it, and then you come in and clean that out to maintain it. The next slide. Another thing we've seen for years and years, decades, is this silt fence. And put in place properly, this silt fence will hold sediment back, and it will allow water to pass through freely. And then straw bales. And all you guys got farms and stuff, we all know we're trying to keep our fields from eroding. We go put straw bales or straw out to try and settle any kind of erosion. So all kinds of products are available to us so that we can control any kind of erosion that will happen. So I just want to talk to you guys about the overland flow of water. And now we've got a gentleman here that works for Gradell Engineering named Mike Carlson that's going to talk to you guys about the flow of water that we can't see underground. Mike? Mike's had hip replacement surgery, so he's kind of slow.
I like to wave my arms a lot, so I'll put this back. Can you all hear me okay? All right. Very good. As Stan indicated, my name is Mike Carlson. I'm a principal geologist for a company called Gradell Engineering Resources out of Jefferson City, Missouri. I do want to say I appreciate everybody braving the raindrops to come here tonight. I also want to say that my intent here is to say or to describe the local groundwater resources in and near this proposed mining operation. So, with that. All right, this is basically just a general outline of some of the things I wanted to touch on regarding the groundwater in and near this proposed quarry operation. I'll start out with a brief description of general area geology. I'll use the fancy word hydrogeology to describe the aquifer, which I'm sure many of you know is described as the St. Francis Aquifer. I also want to make what I hope is an important point regarding intergranular porosity and groundwater flow in porous media. I also want to I have a couple slides to show you regarding groundwater depth, groundwater flow direction. We did some calculations based on available data about rates of groundwater flow in the area of the proposed quarry operation. And then I also wanted to present what we were able to obtain through available water well record information. So anyway, go ahead. This diagram is a little cartoonish, so I do apologize. However, the intent is there. As I think most people here know, the proposed quarry operation proposes to mine the Lamont sandstone, which we've tried to emphasize on this slide. The Lamont sandstone sits right on top of either granite or trap rock. And that contact between the sandstone and the granite is very irregular. And so the characteristics of the Lamont sandstone will vary from place to place just depending on the nature of the Precambrian basement rocks. You'll notice as you go from right to left on this slide, there are also found formations identified as the Bonne Terre, which is also part of the St. Francis Aquifer. It is not present at the proposed quarry site. It's a little further to the north, and I've got a picture that shows that. And then you have the Davis and the Derby Go Run, and then on top of that all you have the Potosi. Those are typically, at least the Davis and the Derby Doe Run are typically described as the St. Francis confining unit. In many areas of this part of the region, the Lamont sandstone is a confined aquifer because all these other bedrock layers are on top of it. In this particular case, there is no other bedrock units above the Lamont, and therefore we would consider, as a hydrologist, we would consider the nature or the characteristics of this aquifer, the behavior of it, to be what we call unconfined, okay, as opposed to confined. Everybody here has probably heard of artesian wells. That's a confining aquifer type situation where the pressure head on the groundwater is sufficient where it actually comes up at the surface, much like a spring. Not exactly like a spring, but much like a spring. In this particular case, because it's an unconfined aquifer, it's in effect exposed to ambient air conditions. And it would behave, and I'll show a picture here, and keep in mind the surface water flow diagram that Stan was depicting. Because it's unconfined, it's typical, it's not at all unusual to have groundwater flow moving in the same general direction as surface water. Okay, maybe not exactly one for one, but generally speaking, and I've got a diagram that will show that. Okay, my outlines, what I've done is I've focused my attention primarily on basically a mile east, south, northwest. I've identified the sections, 4, 5, 6, and then 28 through 31, or 33, I guess. And I've tried to identify the mine plan area of this proposed mining operation. This is a surface geology map. I know it's kind of difficult to see because the pastels, if you have good eyesight, you can make out what is identified as CLM, which is the Lamont sandstone. Okay, and then a little further to the north, you'll see what I'll call greenish with the abbreviation CEB, which is the Bonne Terre, which I said previously, just a few seconds ago, is not present at this site, but it is located just a short distance to the north. I've also identified the Potosi. It's just because my outline touched upon that particular bedrock unit. And then to the south, you'll see, probably in one of the major rivers there, the PC stands for Precambrian, which once again is the granites and the trap rocks that I'm sure everybody's familiar with around here. The other thing I guess I'll point out, it's not overly obvious, but as you go to the north and east of this proposed mine site, you'll see kind of a very distinct change in orientation of these colored outlines. That's because there is geological complexities in that area. Maybe Ira's going to talk about that, I don't know. And the other thing I've attempted to do on this map is so you know, water wells of record, and that's an important point I stress, of record, because if I can't find them online or other sources, then I don't know about them. So anyway, that's the general geology. This is more. Do I still? Okay. This is more the hydrogeology of this area. Once again, the St. Francis Mountains groundwater province. You see I purposely highlighted the Lamont sandstone, which once again is the uppermost bedrock unit at this facility. From a more regional point of view, the Lamont can actually get as thick as 440 feet. In the region of this proposed mining operation, it generally doesn't get deeper than 300 feet, which is still, in my estimation, plenty thick. You'll also see off to the right-hand margin that typical yields out of the Lamont sandstone wells that are in the Lamont generally are, well, they could range from, if I'm reading that right, 60 to 470 gallons per minute, but the average is much lower, about 150. And once again, that's more on a regional basis. That's not specific to the area of the proposed mining operation. All right, this gets back to my earlier comment about intergranular porosity and flow. I think maybe, and I want to try to hopefully clear up what could be a potential misconception on the part of some folks, because I have read some of the public concerns that have been expressed. This is a sandstone. It's not a carbonate. There's no underground rivers. Okay, there's no caves. There's no springs. It's all sandstone. Okay, that means the groundwater moves through and around all the individual grains of sandstone, and as a consequence, that movement is very. If you can see, make out the red outline, you can see how convoluted, if you will, the flow path is. Us hydrologists have a word for that. It's called tortuosity. But it's the main point I'm trying to make is that that's really, from an idealized point of view, that's how groundwater moves through sandstone. There's no underground channels. It doesn't go from point A to point B in a matter of hours. Anyway. Okay, this is a map, and by the way, folks, everything I'm presenting is available to you. It's public record. Okay, it's out there if you know where to find it. If you're familiar with a platform that I believe the MDNR sponsors, it's called GeoStrat. You just Google it, you can find it very.
You went out.
Yeah. Am I back? All right. I was thinking, they time me out in karaoke, don't they? All right. Anyway, so this, like I said, this was something from an online platform called GeoStrat. This is, once again, I've tried to identify as accurately as possible the proposed mining operation, the long-term mine plan boundary of this proposed mining operation. And then what this is intended to show is based on available water well data. I didn't make this map up, okay? This is something that's available online, but it seemingly indicates generally that the depth to groundwater, not the elevation, the depth to groundwater is somewhere just under 80 feet. The little circle, if you can't read it, it's 70 feet. So, you could say the depth to water in this area is generally 75 to 80 foot. Once again, I'll underscore the fact based on available information. All right, am I still here? I'm getting all paranoid, I'm sorry. This is probably in my estimation, one of the more important diagrams for you guys to pay attention to, just because it shows the flow direction of groundwater in the region of this proposed quarry operation. And as you can see, that movement is generally, I'll call it to the east-northeast, okay, just as an overall general, but it's very clear that it moves. You could call it northeast if you want. But the contouring on this, the little lines that you see are called isocontours, okay? It's where they've had data points from well records that are basically the same or very similar water elevation. You just extrapolate, interpolate between the well points, and you come up with maps like this. But the important point is the flow direction. Okay, if you were a property owner to the west of this operation, the groundwater is not flowing your way. It's going to be flowing easterly. Okay, and once again, I'll refer back to Stan's surface maps, where if you looked at this map and looked at those surface drainages, they're very similar. Okay, this is another one that I just wanted to try to make the point I said earlier, because of the intergranular flow and just the weird way that groundwater has to try to move through a sandstone. We did some calculations based on information that we got from the Missouri Geological Survey. In the spirit of full disclosure, it was some well testing that was done on the city of Farmington wells, I believe it was. And then that, in addition to what we can calculate as a hydraulic gradient, which means, in this area, water is not like flat, it dips, okay? And in most situations, groundwater dips. Even if you go out to the Mississippi River Valley, groundwater has a perceptible dip to it. It's not much, but but there's a very pronounced dip to the groundwater table out here. So anyway, our calculations are really seen to suggest that the typical travel time for a molecule of water to get from point A to point B is about 6 to 58 feet. Okay? And just to kind of put that in context, and I'll use the higher value of 58 feet per year. If you had a well located basically a mile away, it would take 91 years for that molecule of water to get to your well. Okay. I guess the other thing I would add, seems I brought it up, not that everybody necessarily understands what a hydraulic gradient is, but generally speaking, the hydraulic gradient in this area, in my estimation, is probably anywhere from 15 to 20 feet per mile, which is not extraordinarily steep, but it's definitely steeper than out in the Mississippi River levels. Okay, I'm showing once again the water wells. I kind of showed this a little bit on earlier maps. And once again, my frame of reference, I gotta draw the line somewhere on reviewing information, otherwise it's just never ending. So I really confine my review to the little yellow squares and the blue dots. The blue dots represent what I call old strippers logs. They're older wells. Back in the day, MGS, Missouri Geological Survey, they used to have groups of people that would take the cuttings that a water well driller would generate as they're drilling a well, and they would examine and identify the various formations these wells go through. The yellow squares are more recent water wells. I think the requirement for reporting wells probably started in about 1988. I don't think anybody really started reporting them until the early 90s. So if you have a well and your well is, say, older than, say, 1988, chances are you won't require to report it, so therefore it's not an available record to be reviewed and assessed and evaluated. Okay, this is a table summary of those little squares and blue dots you just saw. The blue dots are the top four of this table. All the other little yellow squares represent water wells of record, which in my mind means 1988 or newer. And I just tried to list some information. There's a lot to digest on this particular table. I guess a couple of things that I wanted to try to emphasize is that, once again, you can see we tried to identify the top and the bottom of the Lamont sandstone. Then we also identified whether or not that particular well touched down into the granite or the trap rock. By and large, very few of them went as deep as the granite. But this is where this is my support for the earlier comment that the thickness of the Lamont is probably 200 to 300 foot on a good day in this area. And once again, that's highly dependent on how hummocky the basement, the granitic basement is. I also want you to take notice of the gallons per minute. Those are reported productions that, once again, are identified by the drilling company on the records they are required to submit to the DNR. You won't even see any of those anywhere really close to 100 gallons per minute. And I didn't bother to take an average. Just by looking at the numbers, it looks like it's probably around 30. So production is pretty low, and I'm sure some of you are well owners and have very good ideas about your production rates. But this is the information I had available to me. All right, I believe Clark had indicated that all of us are going to talk, and then questions will be later. Okay. So anyway, I just to reiterate, I'm trying to present some information to you folks on general area geology, general information on hydrology. One of the more important points I wanted to make to you all is flow through a sandstone is much different than in a limestone. And we're all very much aware of the underground streams and caves and all of that sort of thing in many parts of the state. Fortunately, that's not a factor at this proposed location. I also wanted to present information on groundwater depth and groundwater flow direction. And then this rate of flow, I just want to try and press upon everybody that it is pretty darn slow moving groundwater. And then just to present the information we were able to obtain for this presentation. That's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike. So next, we want to bring up Keith Henderson with Buckley Powder. He's a technical manager, and he will touch on all the blasting parts.
Bluetooth pairing. Bluetooth pairing.
Good evening. Does it work? In the back, can you hear me okay back there? Okay. Very directional, so I can't tell if it goes dead up here. So, my name's Keith Henderson. I'm with Buckley Powder Company. I've been in the blasting industry 30 years. I started when I was 3. Not. Okay. Sorry, Father. I'll have to come to confession later. So, but I just want to touch a little bit on the blasting operations here relative to the proposed site. So, the blasting governing code that's in the state of Missouri is the Missouri Blasting Safety Act that went into effect in 2007. Prior to the Blasting Safety Act, there were no safeguards at all on blasting as far as, there were within the companies and so forth. But nonetheless, there was nothing that was consistent throughout the state. So the purpose of the Missouri Blasting Safety Act then was basically twofold. First, it was to ensure that the people doing the blasting were licensed and trained. And that was very critical, especially from our industry standpoint, because the challenge was that if you could go to Walmart and buy a gun, you could go out and be a blaster. And for us, that was a real concern in the industry because we had some people at times that would do blasting that really shouldn't be doing blasting. So this ensured that the blasters are licensed and that they're trained to use explosives. And in addition to that, then, is it established a safe level of blasting criteria to ensure that any vibration or air overpressure from blasting would be at levels such that they would not cause harm to the surrounding community. So in licensing, what it basically directed is in order to get a license in the state of Missouri to be a blaster, you have to have 1,000 hours of experience directly working under the supervision of a licensed blaster. Basically, for most work time applications, that's about 6 months worth of experience. And that has to be an accumulated amount of time within a 2-year period. So they can't work for a few months and stray out for a while and then come back in. So it has to be somewhat consistent. In addition to that, then there's a 20-hour minimum training course that has to be attended and approved by the state. And then they have to complete an examination in order to get their license at that point. To continue on being a blaster, every 3 years they have to do a renewal. And as part of that renewal, they have to illustrate that they've been to an approved blasting course. It's an 8-hour refresher course. And at least 4 of those 8 hours are supposed to be obtained within the year just prior to applying for renewal of their license. So our Scott City, Missouri location would be the most likely location that would be servicing the site, although we do have one in Herman, Missouri too. But at Scott City, Missouri, we have 5 licensed blasters at that location. All the blasters have completed an intensive 32-hour course of training, and that's with me for a full week. And if you think I will bore you to death in 5 or 10 minutes, imagine spending 32 hours in a week with me. But in that case, they go through a very intensive course that we put all our guys through, and it is in conjunction with the surface blasting standard operating procedure that we have developed for our company as a minimum level for ensuring safety, not only in regards to ground vibration and air overpressure, but also in the control of the shots themselves. In addition to that, our guys have monthly refreshers that are sent out to them every month and are reviewed at their monthly safety meetings. And then they have to go to additional refresher trainings put on by myself and other guys within our technical group. And then that also helps them to update on any technology advancements in explosives as well to make sure they're up to date. In addition to that, we even appraise our blasters. So we have a guy that goes out, and even when our guys have met all the requirements that we require, which are way above what the state requires, our guys are attended by a licensed blaster who himself has been doing this for well over 28 years too. And that is to ensure that they're getting proper guidance and the necessary training to ensure that they're good at what they're doing. In the state of Missouri, and I'm not going to go into the scale distance, if somebody would like to question that in the question and answer section, that'd be fine, but scale distance is just a number within blasting that is used to equivocate a reference point, and the state law establishes that a scale distance of 55 or greater does not require us to seismograph the shot. Now that's in the law. That's not how we operate. In our standard operating procedure within our company, every shot we shoot is video recorded and seismographed. No matter if the blaster is well over that scale distance or not, we still seismograph all our shots to ensure that they are meeting the levels we expect them to meet. Also in the state of Missouri, when you seismograph a shot, then you are limited to an air overpressure reading of 133 decibels, and I want to be very clear, that is not sound. Most of the time people see that and they go, wow, that's really loud. Well, it's not sound. That's an air pressure measurement. That's measured on a linear scale, which is very different from an audible scale. Basically, that pressure is the equivalent pressure of a 27-mile-an-hour wind. To help kind of illustrate that, this is, so one of the things that actually just occurred this evening, I looked on my emails, but one of the things is that when we use third-party monitoring groups, which is something that we would do at this location, we would actually have a vibration specialist company come in and they actually install the seismographs, they monitor the shots. After we shoot a shot, they send us an email notification of what the seismic results were. This is an example of one just south of here that was located down near Perryville, where we had a seismograph station. That particular day, my email inbox got lit up with notifications because it was so windy that day. You can see the weather for that day had a low of 16 miles an hour after the seismograph had triggered, but had wind gusts of over 36 miles an hour. And as a result, the seismograph actually triggered at 134 decibels, which is over the state allowance, right? Now the wind doesn't get cited for that because the wind's not monitored by the state. But that just helps to illustrate that point that that is the equivalency, is that 133 decibels is the equivalent of a 27-mile-an-hour wind on its pressure. In regards to ground vibrations, when we monitor, well, we always monitor, but when it's required under state law, what they specify is that the limits of the blast vibrations have to be below what has been established by the U.S. Bureau of Mines in their report of investigations 8507. It's a hugely boring report. If you have trouble sleeping tonight, let me know. I'll email you a PDF version of it. You can read it. It'll put you right to sleep. Basically, what that study found out is that These levels that it established that they put in their Appendix B curve were the minimal possibility of any type of damage. So if we stay below these limits put out in 8507, there's no concern of damage below the levels, and I'll show you a graph for that here in a second because it's actually graphed out. But basically, these are the levels that are established. Now, when they are looking for damage, U.S. Bureau of Mines, when they were looking for damage, what they classified as damage was minor cosmetic cracking. And we're talking hairline cracks to like the weakest building materials, plaster, drywall, okay? Not concrete and mortar, because concrete and mortar are even more resilient to those effects on ground vibrations. And so that's one of the largest concerns most people have is, what does this mean for my foundation? What does this mean for my basement? I've actually shot concrete before. It's way tougher to shoot than rock. It's very resilient. It can stand up to blast vibrations very well. So the main concern we want is to make sure that we're not even doing minor damage or minor cracking. So that's what the U.S. Bureau of Mines Study 8507 did. It's an extensive study that concentrated on actual measurement inspection of 240 blasts at 76 homes in 10 states, and then it combined that results from several other studies that the U.S. Bureau of Mines had done that included another about 150 structures and 718 shots in recognition of that. And so what this criteria established was a minimal level at 0.5 inch per second in a lower frequency range, and I'll explain that here in a little bit, and then up to 2 inches per second in a upper frequency range. Go next slide. So that's what the Missouri Blasting Safety Act adapted to the law, was the Appendix B curve established in that criteria. Again, the threshold damage that it's protecting against is most superficial interior cracking of the type that develops in all homes independent of blasting. So in this case, this is the U.S. Bureau of Mines curve you'll see on the screens here. The dark purple line is the line that the U.S. Bureau of Mines established as the level for maintaining readings below that. Every seismograph that we utilize and the seismograph that the third-party monitoring groups utilize print out this curve, and they will plot all the ground motion then on those on that particular graph. And as long as they are below that level, those are considered safe level of vibration criteria. The dotted pink colored line above it is for drywall, because drywall is a little more forgiving than plaster is when it comes to this type of vibration. And so that limits just a little bit higher in drywall construction type of situations. The reason it's lower, basically you'll notice at the bottom it says frequency in hertz. If you drop a rock into, and this is the easiest way to kind of explain it to everybody, but vibration waves will go out from a shot similar to dropping a rock into water. As that water is displaced, right where the rock goes into the waves, there will be a large displacement of the water. And then as those waves go out, those waves will get shorter and further apart. And so the same thing then happens with blast vibration waves. As they go away from the shot, the intensity of those waves gets smaller, but then they get further apart. And the reason the frequency levels or the criteria at the lower frequencies are lower is because that's the natural frequencies at which most homes or buildings resonate. Believe it or not, this building right now is sitting here moving constantly. We don't really notice it, but as a result, if I put energy into the ground that matches the natural frequency of the structure, it'll cause that structure to oscillate a little more, which could cause a little more stress, which is why then the lower limits on the lower frequencies and those ranges for the home are lower still. And again, that criteria is such that we have to stay below that line on the U.S. Bureau of Mines curve for blast vibrations that lead from the site. In the proposed area, I was kind of conservative about how I drafted this. This is a little bit closer, but basically what I wanted to try to do is illustrate where roughly the first production shot would be. It would be a little further than that, actually back on the property. And the distance actually to the structure is a little further, but I went ahead and used the criteria of 1,600 feet. So I chose a closer number to be a little more conservative in the estimates. But right now the plan is that we'd use a 4-inch diameter hole. Basically, when we determine how we're going to detonate a blast, we do it based on sound scientific principles that have been developed throughout the industry over the last many years. This is not a rule of thumb. We always approach everything very much from a standpoint of what type of energy we need to break a given amount of rock, dependent on the type of geology that we're contending with. And this is just to illustrate an example. I'm not going to go through all those numbers. The main number that I kind of wanted to just hit upon is that there's a criteria understood as pounds per delay in the industry. And simply what that means is that when I detonate a shot, no matter how many holes I'm shooting, I will shoot each of those holes individually. Now, explosives travel at a very high rate of velocity. And as a result, that if I put a separation of delay within those as discovered by the U.S. Bureau of Mines to be within an 8 millisecond time frame, that is considered a single charge. So if I shoot one hole and then I shoot another hole within 8 milliseconds, the U.S. Bureau of Mines considers that as one hole going off, so that would be considered 2 holes going off. And basically, what I've done here was conservatively, again, estimated that 2 holes per delay at this current distance with this particular blast design of an intended target bench height of around 40 feet, that the expected vibration at this particular location based off of the U.S. Bureau of Mines data and everything else would calculate out to 0.152 inches per second. That's about 20% of the level, the lowest level that is on that curve. I don't anticipate us being at the lower side of that curve. We anticipate being mid-range or even to the higher side. So that's going to be well within the safe blast criteria. The plus is that the production blast, the very first few production shots that would take place, would be the closest shots to the structures, and at that point we'll be moving further away until they would get into the later phases of mining. Now, the one thing that's important to understand is with the limits that are put forth in law, that in a certain sense it's kind of like a speed limit, if you will, for the particles in the ground. But unlike when I was driving down here from where I live up in Franklin County, when I was trying to drive down here, I don't want to get a speeding ticket, so I drive at the speed limit or maybe a mile or two over on that. But we don't do that in blasting. It's not like we want to see how close we can get to the limit. And the reason is because even though we're using a lot of energy in explosives, it's still a finite amount of energy. And we want to utilize as much of that energy as possible to adequately break and move the rock for ease of excavation and mining purposes. So the best shot for the mining operation is the best shot for the community too. So we actually use that seismograph data not only to ensure that it's creating a safe... Connected. I thought my wife was here for a second. We don't only use that criteria then to determine whether or not we're in compliance, but if we see something out of the ordinary, we want to use that criteria then too to see, is there a blast design that we need to make in a change? Because if something is out of the ordinary, then we kind of want to take that back to why are we seeing that? Which is also why we video the shots, so we can see how the shots are responding to the explosive's energy. So I think that is my last one, is correct for this. So that's my last one until, as Clark stated earlier, I'll be here if anybody would have any additional questions regarding blasting.
All right, thank you, Keith. It's a lot of information. I think the question that I would have is, how often are you going to blast a week, right? How big are they going to be? That's what we want to know. Let's talk about it. So, as we establish the benches, we determine what elevations, we establish them by quality, right? Early on in the process, we may shoot 2 times a week. Good. As time goes on, we establish definitive benches depending upon quality, height, bench heights, we could possibly just shoot one time a week. Could be once every other week. So that's a lot of information, and I know some of you are concerned, how many, how often, when is all this going to happen? We will never shoot before 9 o'clock in the morning. We will never shoot after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We will never shoot on the weekends. So I think that's good information to know. I would want to know that. So. All right, so we've talked about drilling or blasting. Let's talk about the primary crusher. So I've chosen a IROC TC20. It is a track-mounted machine, portable. As you can see, it has the feed hopper on the back end. That's where the material is introduced, and it goes through the throat of the crusher. It's an HSI, horizontal shaft impactor. It is sized with 2 curtains inside the crushing chamber and is discharged on the end. There is a chance for some dust right there, isn't it? That's a chance for some dust, so let's look at that. I'm afraid to move because I think this thing will not work. I'll show you what a spray bar is. I'd like to point it out, but I don't want to take a chance. That's a spray bar, common with these crushers or any other operational situations where you may need dust mitigation. So as the rock is fed into the hopper, it goes across the grizzlies, enters into the throat of the crusher. These water sprays sprayed directly on the material. It actually is atomized from the tip speed inside the crusher. Okay, it creates a fog. So there's a point that we will use mitigation to eliminate or reduce dust. In fact, it's eliminate. The other piece of this is we're going to utilize overland conveyor rather than haul trucks like a lot of places do. Minimizes the impact, certainly of dust mitigation, energy. So we're going to choose to do the overland conveyor. What that will do, it'll bring it out from the mine site, will allow us to, quite frankly, to help us to be more efficient. Okay, so the rate that we're going to feed the wet plant, and the guys will be able to talk about that. We're looking at probably 300 ton an hour, okay? That will be carried on a 36-inch overland conveyor. At that point, it will come up, and we'll let Jason Spangler and Troy Zickert come up from HiChem, and they will take you through the process of the wet plant, okay?
Check. Yes, good evening. My name is Jason Spangler. I'm with CRS. Our company is located in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. CRS is owned by my father, who has approximately 30 years of experience in the aggregate and crushing industry. I've had the privilege of working underneath him for the past 8 years, and I've learned quite a bit. And I'm excited to show you the proposed wet plant that we have designed for Nexgen. Go ahead with the slide. These next few slides are what we call in the industry a footprint drawing, and I can point out some of the equipment to just familiarize you with the names of the different pieces that I'm going to be talking about later when we look at the process flow. So a couple pieces of equipment here that we can see. I'll start off with a feed bin, which is connected via a conveyor. The conveyor goes into a screen. This is a wet screen, or a primary screen they call it. You can see the screen here, and right below the screen is the sump, which is where the slurry is collected. Of course, on top of this screen are also spray bars. The spray bars are jetting water and hitting the material and turning that material into a slurry. Of course, any of the material that is too big and is not small enough to fall through the screen is called your oversize, and that will fall off onto a oversized belt. Another piece of equipment that we can see here is the dual attrition scrubbers. They have 125 horsepower motors on top of them, and they're basically a ginormous blender. I'll talk a little bit more about what our dual attrition scrubbers do when we get to the process flow diagrams. The heart of the operation is called a density separator. As you can see here, it is a tower on a stand. It's about 65 feet in the air. The tower itself is a square, and it's a cube shape, and then it then cones at the bottom. Here we have a pinch valve, and up here we have a weir and a weir collection box. The big tanks that are here and here are a part of the clarifier system. Troy from HiChem will get a little bit more into what the clarifiers do. This here is the control tower, and right here we have what we call a dewatering screen section. So part of the dewatering screen section includes cyclones that are mounted over the top, that are mounted onto a manifold. The cyclones feed into a collection box, and then that spills onto what we call a dewatering screen. The dewatering screen takes the slurry from the cyclones and dewaters it and turns it into a product that you can actually then put onto a conveyor. If you do not dewater a slurry, it's too sloppy when it goes onto a conveyor. It has too much water. So that's the reason why we have to dewater it, so it will actually go onto a conveyor. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So again, just kind of taking you on a virtual tour of what the plant will look like, where the different pieces of the equipment will go that make up the entire wash plant. I did forget to mention some of the other pieces of equipment that are a part of the wash plant are going to be the mud press or the plate press, and the equipment that goes with that station will be touched on a little bit more by Troy from HiChem. Next slide. So right here we can actually get a really, really nice visualization of the density separator. So as you can see here, like I had said before, it does stand 60 feet in the air, okay? And you can see it's mounted, again, it's a 10 by 10 frame, and then it tapers here at the bottom. Mounted on top is a cyclone, and mounted at the bottom here would be a pinch valve. Next slide. Again, just another angle of the plant. Next slide. So these next three slides are really the meat and potatoes of the wash plant. These are the blueprints that we follow when we're on site, and I can actually show you the journey that the sand will take once the loader operator scoops it from his pile and puts it into the wash plant. So we can kind of follow it here. So the loader operator dumps his bucket into the feeder. The sand then travels from the feeder on a conveyor and goes into the screen. The screen has spray bars on top. And again, if the material's too big, so maybe it could be clumps of clay or rock, or it's called oversize, and it will not go through the screen. It will jiggle and fall off onto a conveyor, which we call the rock conveyor or the oversized conveyor. The rest of the material, which is pretty much sand and gravel at this point, falls through the screen and is collected in a sump. At that point, that is where we are combining water and sand to make a slurry. Slurry travels quite nice in polyurethane pipe. So from here, as that slurry fell into our sump, it's now going to be picked up by a pump, and that pump is going to take it to a cyclone. Next slide. So that slurry is now traveling to the top of the density separator, right here. So the sand slurry mixture from the screen sump just arrived to the top of the 60-foot density separator. Now, a cyclone is actually a very interesting piece of equipment. There are no moving parts on it. All it is designed to do is to spin slurry at a very high rate. Slurry is spun, it creates a vortex, and by creating a vortex, the slurry has two places to exit the cyclone. The particles of sand will shoot downward, and what we call color, or the dirty water, is spun up. Okay? And as you can see, we have two arrows, one going into the density separator and one arrow going to the cyclone overflow sump. Now, what happens when the slurry is shot into a density separator? A density separator is the only piece of mining equipment that can size sand using water and pressure. It's the only, there is no screen that is small enough to size sand. It's too small. So you have to use water and you have to use pressure. Water is injected into this entire cell, and so this entire tower is full of water and slurry, and what that does is it causes the particles to flow around, and it begins to create a bed depth. What happens in a pressurized cell when you introduce sand is the fine, light particles will float over the weir and are collected here at the weir overflow box. And as you can see then, the weir overflow box feeds into this sand sump right here. The coarse material, and again there's only two ways for sand to exit this thing. The coarse material drops out of the bottom via a pinch valve. That slurry is put onto a sand screw. The sand screw is used, one, as a dewatering station, and two, as a final rinse and final scrub for the product. Again, we cannot put slurry on a conveyor. It's too sloppy. It needs to be dewatered. So that's why we use the sand screw to dewater, and we'll go out here to its own coarse product pile. So again, that was one way for sand to exit the density separator. The other way was the light, fine material to exit over the weir and to be collected into the weir overflow. But as you can see, we actually have more than just one arrow going into this sand sump. We actually have two more arrows going into here because we're constantly collecting our water, our slurry, and we're recycling it. So you can actually backwards follow a couple of these flows to show you what goes into the sump. So this arrow here backtracks to the screw, the sand screws weir. There's a weir on the sand screw. as water is introduced into the sand screw, it will flow over the weir. That water is collected, again, dirty water is collected and then shot into this sump. The other place we are collecting dirty water is what we call the bottoms of the dewatering screen. The dewatering screen is constantly recycling itself from the sump to the cyclones back to the dewatering screen. Our second product pile comes off of this dewatering screen. Again, we have to dewater it, of course, because we cannot stack slurry. And you can backwards follow this to the two cyclones, which is fed by a manifold, which is then fed by this pump, and this pump is fed by this pump is fed by the three inputs here on this, the three inputs that we had talked about. Next slide.
Where are we in the agenda? Where are we in the agenda? We're very lost here. Where are we?
We can't see the slides.
Guys, we've got a lot of information for you. There's been a lot of material that has been presented, a lot of concerns, and we want to make sure we address every one of those concerns. So that's what we've got these industry experts for.
Folks, I'm here to talk to you about flocculant, and what Jason was getting to before he was interrupted was all that dirty water, all those slimes that are washed off the sand have to go somewhere. They have to be used for reclamation in the plant if they're not a saleable product. So the clarifier that he pointed out, you can skip to that slide. This clarifier is an underflow clarifier. You'll see the deaeration tank, all those cyclones, and the stop talking, and I will. It's that simple, right? It's rude to talk over people. We're trying to present you with information. Flocculant was one of your concerns, and that's what I'm getting to. So the dirty water then is added to a cell. Anytime that you add water to a fixed volume, you get a rise rate. The flocculant has to be added to get the solids to settle against that water rise rate, so that the water can be reused, so that the plant doesn't have to run high cap wells all the time. Ideally, these plants are designed to recapture 95% of the water that is in the system. So the water loss would then come from the whip pile sand, the finished sand, which will go out at 14-15% moisture. But these guys have added the opportunity to recapture that water with those retention ponds that were discussed earlier. So we're talking about material, flocculant, that is used in a number of things that people don't anticipate. Cosmetics, food processing. I deal with 9 different industries besides sand and aggregate. But ideally it's here and it's used here to allow these guys to recycle water, to not have to continue to pull water out of your aquifer. That's the long and short of it.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open things up for questions. Okay. All right. So, I have to switch things up. All right, so let's go to John Jerling.
It's John Giorgio, second generation industrial hygienist. My father started this consulting firm, John A. Giorgio and Associates, located in St. Louis in 1978. I've basically been doing industrial hygiene since 15 years old. He had us kids working. So I had a presentation, but does anybody have any questions about industrial hygiene? It's essentially the air sampling and whatnot. And maybe there was, I believe there were some studies that were gone over that talked about silica being detected. The Peters study, I believe. Sure.
Test, test. You guys hear me okay? Yeah, if you have a question, if you please line up right here, and I will hold the microphone while you guys are asking your question. You guys will just stand right here on the blue line and ask your question, and John will answer you.
Okay, you can hold it. So I'm going to be up and down a little, I think, over some questions. But as far as this is concerned, have you done particulate monitoring as a basis? And are you going to continue doing particulate monitoring? And are you going to publish the results?
Particulate monitoring at this site? That has not been done yet. I'm sure it will be done. Likely to establish baselines, not only before any work has been done, but also after the overburden and site prep has taken place and before any blasting has been conducted. And then again, once operations begin, there would be another round of sampling.
You want to hold it? All right. I want to thank all the gentlemen who came up here tonight and gave their presentation of what this is all about. But truly, the people in this audience are wondering what's going to happen when you guys shut the mine down or if our wells go out, and if we're going to have any health practices. Everything you presented tonight was in your professional livelihood, what you do. That doesn't help us understand everything that we want to know. My question is, one of them, I have quite a few, I don't know if you'll let me do it all. The one gentleman came up there and said something about the water level and how much they use the water. Is there any written facts how much water they use in a year's time or a month's time? I got down on, it said in the paper that it's 6,000 gallons a minute. Well, I'm going to use my rough calculations now. I'm no mathematician, but I got at 6,000 at 1 minute, it's 48,000 for 8 hours. Okay, 8 hours. For 30 days, 1,440,000 gallons. For a year, if these are correct though, 52,560,000 gallons a year. Now, is this going to be taken away from all the people's wells around these areas? Other than what you said about they're having a lake up in this area?
6,000 gallons a minute is inaccurate.
This was in the paper, sir.
It's inaccurate. About 2,100 gallons a minute will flow through that process when it's full. And as I said, we clarify the water in the system. So the only points of water loss will be the whip pile, which we'll recapture into those storage ponds. That is our source of makeup water. This is not going to come out of your aquifer at 52 million gallons a year. That's not the idea. That's why they've spent the money on clarifiers, process water tanks, belt presses, is water recapture.
Okay. Can I answer all these, ask these questions I got, or do I have to sit down after one?
Are they related? If they're related to water flow? I'm fine. That relates to me, sure.
You want a chair?
I might need a crutch. I'd like to know what happens to our water after you guys leave this mining area. One gentleman, I think he spoke, the gentleman is Stu, I think it's still Stan, right? I was talking to Stan when I first came in here, and he said that the water table will not be affected by all the wells on this area, but there's so many areas around this where they're located. It's going to affect us all eventually. But when one gentleman's presentation said that if they only use about 100 gallons an hour, what the hell it was, you know? What about that? What are you going to do about the water if some wells going around? That one picture that he had up here showed a house right near your plant. Will they be affected right off the get-go?
They will not.
They will not.
They will not. Your aquifer volume is significant, and it's replenishing itself regularly. So it's not a fixed volume of water there. As he said, that water is running through that area, although it permeates slowly through that area, and you may be able to speak to this better. It is constantly replenishing itself.
I'm not. You don't have to do that. I got a big mouth, you know.
At a flow rate of what? It replenishes itself, but at a flow rate of what?
You said a gallon, 50. What was your?
I don't know. I replenish the rapidity.
Okay.
What was that now, sir?
That I can't tell you. That would be up to the hydrologist.
Okay.
I don't want. No, now's your hip. I want you to stay right there. You yell to me, and I'll yell to them.
Have you got other mines around the country of this same nature?
I manage the water clarification for 41 of these facilities in 9 different
I'm
states.
not talking about you. I'm talking the partnership of this organization here. What happens if some of this sand gets in the air, and it's in the paper, because I got the paper clips here stating that if any of this sand gets on the ground, crops, wildlife, our drinking water, our air environment, our breathing capacity can be affected. Can you guarantee that not to happen?
Based on studies that are out there in California, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the contribution of crystalline silica, respirable crystalline silica, in the community is negligible. The contribution from the mining activities.
You never had no incidents where people get affected with the breathing of this stuff?
These studies haven't shown it. I mean, silica is everywhere. There are background levels of silica. There were some studies that were done where they looked at upwind and downwind levels of silica. And in some areas, the upwind levels of respirable crystalline silica were actually slightly higher than what were downwind.
Okay. When I came in and I was talking to Stan about Gipco over there, and he mentioned something, I think one of the ladies asked a question about the health factor of the employees of these mines. And he stated that these gentlemen have got hazmat equipment on. Now, if they have to work under those conditions, what could happen if something, the wind blows? I even asked them, do they dump this sand on the ground before they clean it or whatever they do? And I think he said yes. Right. So if they're so intense in having health-wise on their employees, how is it not going to affect the people in this area?
Let me show you a couple of slides. Just to give everybody a little primer on silica and sand. I'm not sure if you guys saw the jars that are on these tables here. They are samples of a couple of different grades of sand, which would be the end product from a plant like this. The smallest size, the size that's going to be coming out of the plant is basically going to be 100 microns in size to 560 microns in size. The level of concern, the size of concern for crystalline silica is the respirable range, which is basically 2.5 to 4 microns and below. So the outgoing sand is going to be, the smallest particles are going to be 100 microns and below, or 100 microns and above. And the particles of concern that are for respirable or for exposure is the respirable range, which is basically, 40 times below the smallest size. That's what I'm telling you. So if you think of 100 micron size being a basketball size, 2.5 micron size is going to be the size of a Skittle, a small piece of candy. Pardon?
It travel faster and farther.
It can. Now the studies that have been done, just to throw out a couple of different guidelines, OSHA has a permissible exposure limit for workers of 50 microns per cubic meter in the respirable range. Community, pardon? That's what I was going to get to. Yep, community, we don't use OSHA guidelines for community exposure. There's something called the healthy worker effect, plus workers are at the plant for 8 hours a day versus somebody being at their house for 24. So the community guidelines set up by California, Texas, I think there's 13 different states, is 3 micrograms per cubic meter on an annual average.
Are you guys going to be working 24/7?
Yes, sir, potentially. Potentially.
Hey, put the microphone up so we hear.
Potentially, yes.
It'll be 7 days a week regardless one way or another.
It could be. I'm not saying we're going to run every week 24/7.
Like 24 hours a day?
Yes.
Constantly going?
Yes. What's he say? Yeah, we need you to come. I can't hear you, sir.
Hey guys, we got to keep this controlled. So we need, if you got a question, we need people to come up and get in the line. These folks have been waiting. So we do need to keep it controlled, or you guys aren't going to get your questions. So.
One last one. How did you people decide on this area to drill?
Mike's not working. Mike's not working.
So this area was chosen by geography, the quality of sand. It had rail, it had so there's a lot of studies that can be done in terms of geography, where this limestone or sandstone deposits lie. So that's how it's determined. Thank you.
My question is,
That's
I know that you have to follow state and federal regulations for air quality and all sorts of things like that. My question to you is, who monitors you, and how do they enforce those regulations?
So that's a great question. Does anyone from DNR want to explain this, please?
Yeah, so the question was authority in regards to who monitors them in regards to air, and I'll also go ahead and add water surface regulations, so that does fall in the authority of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. When it comes to doing inspections and ensuring they're in compliance with air and water regulations, that will fall underneath our folks at the Southeast Regional Office, Poplar Bluff, who I introduced earlier this evening. So they follow to make sure they are complying with their permits. They would be required to receive permits for their processing facility to make sure that they do not have particulate matter that leaves the site. And also for any possible water or surface water discharge, they are required to receive a permit from DNR and comply with those regulations. How often will they be monitored? I know that really depends on, I'm looking, Brad, real quick, as far as a water permit, how often are they monitored? I will add, maybe, go ahead and come up here real quick, Brad, if you can. So anytime the department receives a concern, they will follow up and do an inspection. But on typical monitoring, I'm saying it's about every 2 years, Brad, for a typical water inspection.
So on the water quality monitoring, they have to sample on a quarterly basis, and they have to sample on a quarterly basis and actually submit that, what we call electronic discharge monitoring report. They have to submit that to the department on a quarterly basis for us to review. If there are exceedances in the permit, then that can flag violations and corrective actions would need to take place. And then we also do routine inspections of those permits, and through our office we respond to citizens' concerns. If a complaint on the facility, that we would come investigate that as well.
I have one further question here. It's obvious that you guys know what you're doing and how to mine silica, because you did the whole thing for us. But and you follow the state and federal rules and guidelines, but you've really not addressed the issue of environmental protection of a very special piece of land, which is Hahn State Park. And we know that those guides and regulations are based on economy. They're based on no harm to human health. They are based on no property damage, but they're not based on anything related to environmental quality of a very special ecosystem. There's no protection that I know of in Missouri law that protects the environment against light pollution, which 24/7, the types of lights and things that will be used there, or the amount of noise or vibration and how that will impact wildlife. So, what do you have to say about that?
Okay, so in regards to first Hahn State Park, so I know one of the handouts that we have over here, and I know one of the handouts that was presented earlier in the week to everybody that we had to email was the showing the watersheds. And this facility, proposed facility, is in a different watershed in regards to Hahn State Park, and there's about a 2-mile difference. And also, I will go back to the environmental regulations. And so, once again, in regards to any water surface runoff, there are regulations that pertain to that. Also, on the air side, they have air regulations that they have to comply with there. In regards to air and noise pollution, we hear that concern quite often. And you are correct, there is no environmental regulation that we have that falls in our jurisdiction in regards to light or noise pollution. That is not something that we review in this application process.
State Park is a dark sky site, and so that could be lost from night glow, and also the vibration and the noise. If somebody we work hard all week so that we can go and enjoy our natural resources, our special places. We set them aside for a reason, okay? And, you know, I don't want to go someplace and hear trucks, you know, and grinding and noise. It won't hurt my health, but it's making my mental health.
Yeah.
Yes, I have three concerns. The first would be noise. I live south of Hawn State Park, and I can hear the trains going down the railroad tracks 4 miles away. And every time the engineer increases the throttle, I can hear it. It's that loud. And now you're going to be loading trains and increasing the traffic. I can hear the trucks going up and down Highway 32, and I'm 4 miles away. And I can hear my neighbor shoot his gun 3 miles away. So now we're talking about blasting, crushers, loading trains, train traffic, and heavy truck traffic. So noise is a concern of mine. I'll just leave it go at that. My second concern is traffic. It's about the worst place on Highway 32 you could create a great increase in traffic, whether by train or trucks. I don't know what sort of plan you have to safety that, but I go through that intersection all the time, and it's blind from traffic coming from St. Genevieve, and it's blind from traffic coming from Farmington. It's sitting in a dip near the top of the hill, and it's a very difficult location. My third concern is all of these studies on water pollution are fine, but what provisions have you made if you screw it up? The reason it comes to mind, 15 years ago or however, I don't have a date, we had a terrible drought in this area, and farmers lost their farms. They had to spend $25,000 drilling deep wells to get to a deeper water table. And if you don't have water, you don't have property. You have to leave. So I don't know what provisions you've made, whether it's deposits in escrow or how to cover possible damage for the surrounding property owners. Those are my three concerns. Thank you.
I'll follow real quick in response. So in regards to the traffic, yes, that is a concern we hear a lot in regards to quarries and what have you, and I understand that. And this is a true answer. That does not fall under our environmental regulation in regards to traffic on highways. And I understand that concern, but in review of this permit application, that falls out of our jurisdiction. In regards to, okay, and follow up on that. In regards to just your general environmental statement, so yes, the DNR, we do have environmental regulations to protect air and water. Our staff do the best they can to make sure that facilities follow those regulations, and that is the best we do. Now, there's not a single regulatory agency that will stand up here and promise you 100% compliance, no matter what area it is. That's a true statement. But we do have our inspectors and our engineers and our scientists that do try to enforce the environmental regulations the best we can, and we do that on a daily basis. In regards to traffic, I do know that, yeah, you guys had some follow-up on that.
And we had a lot of this in the presentation, but in the effort of time, we want to go ahead and get to your questions. We are in conversations with MoDOT. This on the screen is a conceptual that came back from MoDOT with a third lane in there to try to ease some of the concerns of the traffic in and out. You'll notice, it's not on this, but we had it in the presentation, there will be wheel wash, so we will not have foreign material coming in and out of the highway. And then we also have this third lane. As far as the train traffic, I wanted to get this out there to make sure there's been a lot of talk and concern about that. All train traffic is going to be going west. There will be no train operations on 32. Internally, we will make our plan to move our trains inside our plant, and they're going west to Bismarck, and then depending on our partners where we move this material to, on from there. So just want to make sure we got that.
So it's going to affect everybody westbound. How many crossings are there? Westbound, how many crossings?
Who's going to pay for that third lane?
Taxes, our taxes.
We're currently in the conversations on what that's going to cost and how we're going to fund that project.
I don't want to hold the floor all night. I've got a stack of questions here, but I'll try and stick to the ones that relate to the subject that we were just talking about. Traffic, yeah, is a problem. I routinely, at some years out here, I've hiked Hornstate Park 3 times a week. That entrance is in a bad place. I won't say any more than that. It is in the dip. Traffic's coming over the top of the hill. Hornstate Park is a bad intersection. This is going to be worse. So, on a couple of other things, I've been lucky enough to spend half my life in the minerals industry. I've been around crushers. I've commissioned a number of crushers. You're putting in a directory. It's probably one of the noisier crushers that I've ever come across. So there potentially could be a noise problem. I'm just talking facts at this stage. We talked about water, and I heard a term about 400 gallons a minute, correct? That's the usage on site, 400 gallons a minute?
So at times there will be makeup water needed in the process, right? That's why we have the 2 containments. We're going to hold over 12 million gallons.
We'll need it. Yep.
Yeah. So
well, I mean, let me just make a couple of points. You've got washing, or at least you've got water sprays on your screen. You've got attrition scrubbing in your primary at least. You're using water in a clarifier. You're using water, the water's from the process of going through a clarifier. And I apologize, I couldn't see all the schematic from my side. Somebody was standing in front of it as he presented. But you've also got water going through your cyclones and at least 5 other places in the plant. 2 years ago I put in a rock washer which recirculates water at 100 tonnes an hour, which is possibly the sort of rate that you're doing. If you're working 40 hours a week, that's exactly what the rate you could be doing. You may be doing more, you may be doing less. That uses, at this stage, 400 gallons a minute. One item. You've got a whole plant, and you can do 400 gallons a minute. I'm sorry, I have to question. And then the last question for me on this one, you talked about de-sliming. This rock comes out of the ground, you're crushing it, it's not clean. You've got to wash it to make silica. What are you washing off it? What sort of concentrations? What sort of metals? And what are you going to do with it? Where does it go? And several reasons for asking that question. I've been fortunate enough also to audit various quarries around the world, as far away as Australia, including sand plants. I've seen good ones and I've seen bad ones. This is a lot of capital expense. It doesn't look like you're going to be trying to make a bad one, I'll give you that. But I would like to know that somebody's actually done their homework as to what the after effects of this thing are going to be and how it's going to be dealt with. That I haven't heard yet. So it would be nice to actually have the facts.
Right, and we were headed that direction. We wanted to finish the entire presentation. We opened it up for questions, okay? So I'll get back to the closed circuit on the wet plant, right? So there are a couple of ways that you may need makeup water, whether it's teeter water, fresh water. It's certainly through evaporation or absorption, right? Those are 2 things. Even at 400 gallons a minute, if you needed makeup water, when you need makeup water, we can pull the process water from our 2 designated.
That's a different question. I'm talking process water. So you're saying 400 gallons a minute is your makeup water. What's the actual process water requirement?
Everything will be recycled. to the clarifier. We have a belt press. We are harvesting the water out of the belt press. Everything goes back. Everything is wicked through the decant process. Everything is saved from underneath. I think it's a 150 by 200 foot footprint with 4 sumps in it to capture all the water. So yes, we can do that. And unfortunately, we didn't get to show it. So
Clarification.
correct. It goes back into the clarification.
How well sealed is that pump?
Good. Yeah. We won't have settling ponds, right? Everything's going to be impervious. Any sumps that we have will be concrete. We will not have settling ponds. That's why we have a belt press.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yes, right.
Okay, that's fine. Now getting back to the desliming and what you're washing off the rock, what happens to it and what is it? What are the other minerals? Are we talking iron? Are we talking heavy metals? What are we talking about?
Deleterious for the most part. I mean, that could be a lot of things, right? But everything that's captured through the wash process goes through the clarifier, and at that point goes out into a solid stage after it leaves the belt press. It's stackable at that point. So anything, regardless of what it is, will be captured in the clarifier and go through the belt press.
And then done what with?
You know, a lot of things. It's a sellable product. You could use it. A lot of guys use it for pond liners. It's possible to go back into the cement industry for raw feed material. So there's a lot of things that you can do with it. You can also store it for reclamation. So there's a lot of options.
If you're going to put it in the cement industry, with respect, I've spent years in that, and you need to know exactly what it is before you put it in.
Exactly.
And nobody's telling you what it is, but I'm sure you're going to find out. Your partner, I'm trying not to be obstructive. I objected, and the reason I object is that A, I live 7 miles from the plant. B, I'm on one side, one water table that will run from one side of the plant. I spend a lot of time in Vaughan, and I hunt from a property that's 1.5 miles from where you are. And my favourite hunting stand is 50 yards from the side of Jonker Creek. So, I have some reasons to ask questions.
I understand it. Thank you.
I have three separate pieces of concern for myself. The first is when you talked about water particles moving slowly, and you gave a rate of about 91 years before anything would really move. That sounds almost like double the time your lease is. And so I'm wondering if this is just a matter of you passing that off down the line and letting someone else deal with it 41 years down the road, or if you're willing to put some sort of fund together to kind of keep something like that from happening, just like that other gentleman talked about his farms losing, and maybe a fund being set up to keep property protected in the case of your accidents, because just like the gentleman from the Department of Natural Resources says, no one's going to guarantee you 100% success. You'd be a fool to guarantee us 100% success. So what's going to happen when you inevitably make a mistake that causes destruction for thousands of people?
So if we look at this slide, okay, and I'll answer your question. We call it the good neighbor commitment. It goes above and beyond what the DNR requires from us. Nexgen will be available to meet with community monthly to discuss progress, address any feedback. Meetings can be held at times most convenient for community members. What that means is Saturdays, Sundays after church, you can meet with me, we'll talk about progress. All fence line air monitoring results will be shared. Location of monitoring devices will be determined and managed by a licensed consultant. We're not required to do that. We will do that, and we will share the information, okay? We'll pay for water well testing to ensure that your water is as good 3 years from now, or 3 years than it is today, right? So we will pay that. We will let you pick.
We'll let you pick a consultant. We'll pay for the testing.
Bluetooth pairing.
I apologize, folks. This facility equipment here too.
Well, it seems like all you're really offering to pay for are testing results, or maybe a meeting once in a while, as opposed to actually setting up a fund set aside, maybe an escrow, to purposefully have money ready for when you make a mistake. off this mine, you can't set aside some money to help protect the people it affects.
So Mayor, I'll just, while we're trying to get that, I'll try to speak as loud as I can. So in regards to what we, the Department of Natural Resources does in regards to mining is, if you look at one of the maps we provided, so the entire mine plan area is submitted for 249 acres. At this point, Nexgen has permitted area for 115 acres. And when I mean they permitted, they have, and they're required, anytime a mining company comes in and mines a piece of property, they're required to post a bond with the state of Missouri to help police ensure that reclamation is conducted. If for some odd reason, at the end of their process, if they do not actively bond or actively reclaim the area, per the reclamation. Okay, so if they do not actually reclaim the area per the requirement, the state of Missouri does have bonded money that they can use to conduct reclamation.
So the state of Missouri has it. Does that mean it's our money, or is it NextGen's money that's paying for it?
No, so it is money that the state of Missouri can use to conduct reclamation efforts to help with the environmental remediation, if that is needed.
How is that funded?
How is it funded? So Nexgen is required to post that bond money with the state of Missouri. So at this point, they have submitted a plan for 115 acres of mining. They have posted the bond per regulation for that 115 acres. And so we have that. That's in an account that will be held with the state of Missouri until they conduct proper reclamation. Then at that point, the bond is released. If they don't, then the state of Missouri uses that bond to conduct reclamation work.
And so does our work include giving the money back to the people? And how much is that amount that they have to put up? Is it proportionate to the amount that they're expecting to make?
So no. So the requirement is, so it's $8,000 for the first 8 acres. And it's an additional $500 for each additional acre after that.
A lot of the property in Missouri is available for much higher than 1,000 an acre, so that seems like a fraction of the cost for even 1 acre of the land that they have to put up money for. That doesn't seem like it really makes much sense. If I can put up 10,000 but cost 10 million in damages, why does that make any sense?
They're not allowed to cause that amount of damage. It's for environmental restoration. Those are the current regulations that we can collect from the company for them in regards to this permit. It's the current regulations.
Well, that's an unsatisfactory answer to say the least, but my last concern would be the fact that the maps that you guys had on the table over there talking about the different watersheds with your fancy green arrows showing how that'll never affect Hahn. What you didn't talk about was the entire other east part of that map that would potentially be affected by that. We're not just concerned about Hahn. There's so many other places in the state that are worth protecting that just because it's not Hahn doesn't mean it's not worth your time. So I really think it's kind of an oversight on your part to just focus on the 3 places that were mentioned and completely disregard the rest of the state on that eastern direction of that water path.
Yeah, so that map was put together to show the watershed, the 2 different watersheds. And once again, going back to the environmental regulations, they are required to maintain and follow regulations regarding any type of surface water that leaves the site, and also in regards to particulate matter that may possibly leave the site. So the environmental regulations and standards for protection of environment and health in regards to that. So if you look at that, that helps protect the area around this mining site.
So the 2 miles away is that you keep referencing for a couple different parks, that's far enough away that no water will ever come in contact with anything there?
They're not allowed to cause any type of water pollution off their site. So not even 50 yards, 50 feet. So, but we reference that just because a lot of people had questions about Hahn State Park. So we just use that as a reference in that map.
Okay. Not very.
Hi, just some clarification on some of the vocabulary. When you refer to removing the overburden from your site, that is another way of expressing the eradication of what most human beings would refer to as the forest and every living thing within it. Do I understand that correct?
Correct. So correct. In the surface mining industry, the vegetation, the soil, the material that's on top of the commodity that they are trying to reach is moved off the top so they can get to the commodity. That is correct.
Well, you may have heard that right now that this Earth is in a biological meltdown, perpetuated through projects much like that, and conveyed along through euphemisms such as that, removing overburden and the like. And I'm very deeply curious about by what calculus you have determined that the eradication of 250 acres of forest and the loss of that is worth less than your sand.
Check. So yeah, I'll just follow up that. So we followed the Land Reclamation Act and the regulations associated with that. Those are standards that are set to allow surface mining in the state of Missouri. Everybody uses minerals that we obtain from Earth. There has to be mining that occurs somewhere in the state for us to use. Like I mentioned earlier, there's over 700 permitted sites. So yes, surface mining does change that area of the environment. It's what our society uses. But when they remove that overburden, they are required to keep it on site, and that is part of what is used and part of the reclamation process. But yeah, it is a doubt. It does change the area when you do surface mining. There is no way around that.
And is there an intent or some idea that reclamation would involve restoration of the forest as it currently exists? Because America has seen a couple million acres worth of reclamation of previous forest into what looks like terraced golf courses. That accounts for a significant portion of our landscape.
So under the Land Reclamation Act, there are 4 categories that mining companies can reclaim land back to. One is industrial, or that's basically further development. Another one is an impoundment. The other one is agriculture, and the other one is wildlife. So those are the 4 different categories that a mining company must meet when it comes back to reclamation. So does it turn right back to forest under a number of years? No. Like in this particular case, part of the reclamation plan is to have an impoundment there at the site. Another part of it is agriculture. But in many cases, like I said, it's one of those 4 categories that they have to meet in regards to deeming the area complete with reclamation.
I just think we should be very clear about the moral implications about what you're proposing, particularly in light of both the very low value that is commanded by sand in general, as anyone can see from the price we pay for that commodity, as well as what appears to be the end use, at least as publicly reported, the end use of this sand, which would be hydraulic fracturing, which you may have also heard scientists are begging us to stop yesterday if we want our children to survive.
Hi, in my research for this project, it sounded like you were trying to sell the community on the project by saying it would bring 30 jobs to the area. Is that still the case?
Mike, please.
25 to 30 jobs, yes.
Okay, so 25 to 30 jobs. Are those people that you're planning to hire from this area or bringing them in?
Yes.
Yes, hiring them from the area, or yes, bringing them in?
We can bring them in from surrounding counties or within St. Genevieve County, yes.
Okay, so to be clear, you may or may not be hiring people from this area?
I'll make it perfectly clear. We will hire people from this area, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my concern is that silica mining is a leading cause of black lung disease, severe black lung disease. So what I see here is that you are trying to sell a community on giving them maybe 25 to 30 jobs, which is not very much for the amount of damage and concern that we've heard. And then what are you going to do to protect the people in these communities, their family members and their neighbors and their children that are going to be working in this mine and at risk of severe black lung disease?
Yeah, just as far as the workers at the mine, they would be monitored, air monitoring would be conducted on them. We have some examples of some cyclones that would be used to collect respirable crystalline silica samples, and those would be compared to the OSHA PEL, and if they're above the OSHA action level, there's a bunch of medical surveillance that takes place, as well as a written plan to control exposures.
So will employees be wearing some sort of respirator, or is this just a tester to see what they've been exposed to?
If levels are high enough that respiratory protection is needed, they will be required to wear respirators. The goal is to have levels that are low enough that respiratory protection is not needed.
Okay, so again, silica mining is a major cause of severe black lung disease in the 25 or 30 people that they're going to be hiring from your community. Thank you.
I wanted to know how we were going to have access to the air sampling results.
We can post it on our website, make it public to everyone. Or you can come by and we'll be transparent and share it.
My second question is for the gentleman from Franklin County. You talked about the limited effect that the shocks have on, homes and all that. My question is, a home that's already settled is going to have less effect than a home that's already built. People are building homes around here. How is that going to affect new foundations that haven't settled yet?
Well, no home ever quits settling. The earth is in constant motion, and as a result, there's constant fluctuations. But those levels are set forth that are in the Blasting Safety Act, were published by the U.S. Bureau of Mines. Not only that study, but numerous other studies that have been done since that further reinforce the findings of what the U.S. Bureau of Mines found, predominantly because they've set the levels already at a very low level to ensure protection. So all those levels that are listed there are levels that are protecting the weakest building material, which is plaster material. Any new construction is going to have as good or even better resiliency simply for the fact that the building materials are going to be of the higher standard, which are noted in that upper level limit line. So all those levels are noted. I actually had a home right next to mine where they had encountered rock, and I called the home builder and begged him to have them drill and shoot the basement instead of chipping it out, because I knew the time frame that it would take to chip it out, and I knew the time frame it would take to drill and shoot it. And I was not concerned in the least bit about them damaging my home, because I knew the vibration levels would be safe, even though they were going to probably be blasting 60 to 70 feet off my foundation. So I would not even hesitate to have that done next to my house for the expediency of it.
You're saying there wouldn't be a difference between an older home and new construction as far as the effects of the shock on the property?
Well, the older home has more susceptibility if one assumes that the older home would have a plaster and lathe construction interior. And if that's the case, then that plaster and lathe construction would fall under that lower limit anyway. Again, as I mentioned earlier too, the other thing is that we don't try to get as close as we can to the limits. We try to stay well below those limits. And the one thing that I didn't point out that was in my slide was that the scale distance that they reference for not having to monitor that level sets an estimate of about 0.23 or 0.24, somewhere around there, inches per second, which is, I'm going off the top of my head, but it's pretty close to that. The scale distance relative to the projected shots will be over 70 at this and that's for the initial shots. And so as we progress further away, those scale distances will even get higher yet. So the further we get back with the blasting, the less the vibrations should be. As we go back, they should drop. That's the natural attenuation of the ground.
So there'll be initially, we're going to go from bad to better.
No, we're going to go from very low vibration levels relative to what's allowed to even better as we progress back. So the intent, again, the design and the intent is going to keep the vibration as low as possible. I always am very honest with everybody. It doesn't mean you're not going to feel the vibrations from the shot. Doesn't mean that you can't even possibly audibly hear the shot go off. But what it does is it ensures that the levels are going to be low enough so that it's not going to constitute the possibility of causing damage to a nearby structure.
Thank you.
If you got questions, you need to come down, and I don't mind answering questions, but I would rather you come down in regard to that. If you want to ask that question for him, that's up to you.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
He asked if it startled a person, the shot.
The reason I asked is we have a lot of older homes in St. John,
right,
and a lot of us live in them, and that was my reasoning for that.
Right, and as everybody's very well familiar with the mining that takes place already in St. Genevieve, there's a lot of areas of St. Genevieve that are literally undermined, right? And so those blasting levels, comparatively to what we're talking about here at the site, are going to be, especially in St. Genevieve, it's going to be completely negligible. I would be shocked if you could even notice the blasting toward the Weingarten Church. But there might be a very faint audible level, possibly. I'd have to do my distance checking on that. But
thank you.
Okay, thanks.
This is for Mike Carlson. So the water flows northeast, which is right to my house, the groundwater. The top of my well is 840 foot, roughly. The bottom of the mine is 860. My water is 60 foot deep in my well casing. You're not saying I'm going to run out of water? When they mine that low, that water's not going to, I'm going to lose water.
Okay, well, and actually I'm familiar with your situation. Read your email. Okay, you are located downgraded. Okay, and I do not necessarily know what their water usage plans are. Okay, so I've already represented to you folks that generally speaking, wells in this area are pretty low producing wells. I don't know necessarily what your well producing. You don't mind me asking, do you know about what year that well was put in?
My father-in-law said it was probably about 80 years old.
Okay, so it's very old. Okay. Yeah, I don't think, based on the information presented, groundwater moves kind of like a wave. If you can imagine the ocean in a rock. And so it's the groundwater flow is uniformly in a certain direction. Okay? And so it's not like there's not other water to the north or to the south of their operation that is not going to feed into your well eventually. Okay? Now, also my understanding is, okay, and I'm sorry, you said your well was 60 foot deep?
The water, I measured the water down.
It's 60 foot below.
It was 60 foot below it. My home said 100 foot.
Okay. If your well depth, okay, your pump may be at 100 foot. If your well is deeper than that, which I presume it is.
I think it's about 150 to 180.
Okay. So you still have that vertical height. Okay. And once again, I can't sit here and try to relate elevations from your information versus their mining development plan. I do you guys have said, what, 760?
760 to the pole.
760 is the flow. Okay, so you would still have a significant column of water below that that would still be feeding into your well. Okay, it would be hard for me to imagine as a hydrologist that it would have a directed, I'll say short-term effect on your well. I just really don't. I just find it hard to believe.
When we built our well, the well driller said 6 to 10 gallon water.
Yeah, and I can believe 6 to 10.
It don't fill up here, it fills up here, and it fills up to like 40 feet from the top. Then when you step it down, it's got to fill back up.
Right, and does it do it pretty rapidly so far as you know?
We don't use that much water per house.
Okay.
Like 6 to 10 gallon pump, so it may use, that's all it uses.
Right. And that's pretty well. And that's pretty typical for domestic use. Yeah, well, you know, that's pump tests and yeah, and let's face it, I mean, the volume of production into a well is directly related to just how much of that well is, you know, within the water table. So I guess in theory, the deeper the well, the more production you may get. Well, that's the reason. Yeah, and that's the
Test.
Okay. Okay, so I'm not part of that, you know, as far as who's notifying who, so I can't speak.
So, but I didn't get notified, so that means my well will not be tested.
Okay, well, I can't.
Which brings me to my next question or comment. I was told you guys were going to go above and beyond, check the air, the water, and stuff like that. But this thing's been in the making for how many years? And you've kept this secret this long from all of us, and then spring it almost 2 months ago. And I don't even get a freaking letter. What makes us think that you're going to go above and beyond when you haven't so far?
Do you own the property that your house is on?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We did get a letter sent there, yes? Certified letter?
Not to my resident.
Yeah, are you within the parameter? I don't even know your last name. Okay. So I can go ahead.
Got one, and they're further away from the mine than I am.
Okay. So you weren't aware that this was going on? Right. Okay. Well, but I believe we did accomplish everyone required to receive a registered letter.
That's my point. It's only going to be what DNR requests. You're not going to go above and beyond like you said you did at the health department the other day.
Look, we will work with the neighbors. We want to be good neighbors.
Then don't bring it in.
And you guys can come talk to us.
We would love to. We went to your meeting and weren't allowed to speak. We would love to talk to you. That's why I offered up to me.
Before we got all that involved.
Understood. You know, it works both ways. I would love to talk.
I mean, you guys could have come talk.
I agree. I don't disagree. Let's make it happen. Would you agree to that? I mean, we can stand here and blame each other and talk about it, or let's make it happen. I agreed to meet with everyone once a month. Let's do it. Let's do it.
That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Why did you hush the landowners that you leased from them? Yeah.
Good line.
I didn't receive a letter, and I lived right on the other side of the tracks. If it wasn't for my daughter, I would have never known. Why are you ignoring the question? Exactly.
She's not in the line.
Not in line. I'm asking you a question, Tom.
Get in the line.
Get in line then.
Yeah, we've all stated it so far. These people have been waiting very patiently. If you have a question, please get in line.
I get it.
So if there's a question in regards to proper notification, please ask. I mean, we'll try to explain it up here at the table. If there seems to be someone who was missing, we'll look at that. But please, if there is an issue of proper notification, I know we have a diagram up here to help explain that, and we'll determine and make sure if that was done correctly or not. So we're willing to do that.
So earlier we heard a comment that there will be no blasting before 9 and not after 3. How can you ensure that the next people that operate the mine are still going to operate under those conditions?
Number one, I don't think there's going to ever be anyone else operating the mine other than these two ownership groups. I do know that, okay? And Keith could speak to this probably more than I can. They're only allowed, the blasters, so many hours a day given the DOT requirements, right? Number one, we never want to shoot before 9 o'clock in the morning, okay? We try to schedule it between 9 and 3. Oftentimes, you'll find 11 o'clock being a very consistent time that we'll shoot, okay? We don't want to disrupt anyone, you know. Most people are gone during the day, so we try to be less intrusive, and there's a lot of reasons, okay? Most of it is driven by the DOT with what these drivers with Buckley powder are allowed to drive per given day.
Next question. So you've got some information about the phases over here. So phase 1, phase 2. When is phase 2, and how do we know there's not going to be a phase 3?
So phase 1 and phase 2, a lot of it is determined on the quality of the material once it be established benches, right? Phase 2 would be years and years and years down the road. If you look at the volume in phase 1, there are some different qualities within that phase, right? The volumetrics show that there's millions and millions and millions of tons in phase 1. So that would be the main focus for the many years to come, is to harvest that material out of the phase 1.
And no plans for phase 3? How do we know that there won't be an expansion beyond that?
Yeah, we'd have to totally re-permit for being that, so.
All right, my first question is, will the slides be sent to each of the members here?
They can be.
I asked the question. We couldn't read the slides, so it was really difficult to follow along. The next question is, what and how many permits are required to begin mining operations? This is the DNR permit, but how many permits in total are required?
Well, I'll follow that up, at least on the DNR side. So obviously they would need an industrial mineral permit for mining. Sound like their process, they would need a water permit from the department, and depending on the application submitted to the department will determine what type of water permit they would need. Earlier this evening, they talked about their crushing and processing operation. That would require an air permit from the department. So I know those 3 items would be required from the DNR as far as permit. Now, in regards to anything possibly from the Army Corps of Engineers, I couldn't speak on their behalf, but in regards to DNR, those are the 3 permits I know that they would require to have. I mean, they could, if they get a mining permit, they could go out there and they could start removing overburden and what have you. Obviously, they would have to get a water permit shortly after that. Obviously, they wouldn't need an air permit until they actually set up their processing operation, and then obviously they probably have to get a construction air permit to go with that.
Can the company describe what permits they're planning on getting?
So, well, what's...
So obviously we've applied for land grant, right? The air permit, in addition to the water, is underway. It's in submittal process now. those are the three that we need.
Will those also go through a meeting like this, or is this the one meeting for all three of those permits?
This is the one meeting, yes.
So once this meeting is complete and 6 weeks have elapsed, then the DNR either approves or denies the permits?
Correct.
Okay. How does this group of people provide their input to the DNR outside of this one meeting?
Okay, so your question was how do they provide additional input following this meeting? Okay, so following this meeting, we are still open to public comment for an additional, and I'm trying to confirm, Bill, I know we identified a date. I think it's for additional 10 days following this meeting. And I can explain that process a little bit. So following this meeting, the department will have up to 6 weeks to make a decision on that. Following, once a decision is made and information is sent out, and there's a reason why we did ask for folks to sign in. If we have your email address and you signed in, or if you signed in and you left a physical mailing address, or you leave information like that, we will send our information to each one of those folks who have signed in. You will receive a letter that will give you what the determination was in regards to the permit, and that permit then will explain that there is an appeal process. That if anybody feels that they were substantially impacted by the decision, either issuance of the permit or denial of the permit, they can file an appeal to the Administrative Hearing Commission, and that is required to be done within 30 days of receiving that letter. And that information would be outlined in the letter regarding the permit of what that time frame is and the process to do that.
So I'm going to repeat it back to make sure I understood it. So basically, we all have 10 days to provide input to the DNR. The DNR has 6 weeks from today to make a decision. Once the decision is made, they then have, we as the landowners around, have an appeal process if we don't agree with the decision for the permit.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes, and that information will be outlined in the decision letter that will be sent to anyone who has signed into this meeting, or we have an email address and they have checked that they were here at this meeting. We will send that information out to them.
Got it. So the next question is, has Nexgen baselined the sediment level of Establishment Creek over the past 12 months?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I'm not sure if I understood it.
Yeah, these are all questions for Nexgen, not the DNR. The question is, has Nexgen baselined the sediment level, the dirt, the mud, the debris level of Establishment Creek over the past 12 months? Yes or no?
No.
Has Nexgen baselined the water temperature of Establishment Creek over the past 12 months? Yes or no?
No.
Has Nexgen baselined the water oxygen level? Yes or no? Of Establishment Creek?
No.
Has Nexgen performed a baseline of the wildlife in the area?
No.
Has Nexgen performed a baseline of the number of eagles in the vicinity of the proposed mine?
No.
Has a stream stabilization plan been created for Establishment Creek?
No.
Has a
We won't be
particular...
affecting, we will not be affecting that creek. From a stabilization, we showed you the mitigating.
But the creek begins at the property site.
Correct. Misunderstood your question, I'm sorry.
So the next question is, has a particulate abatement plan been created for Establishment Creek?
No.
Has the water quality been baselined at Eagle Lake directly in line with Establishment Creek and Greyhawk Estates?
No.
Has the water quality been baselined at Lake Ossie, directly being fed by Establishment Creek?
No.
How far is the maximum reach of the particulates from the operation? What's the maximum radius of any particulate, no matter its size?
it really is going to depend on a lot of factors. We don't know. The smaller the particles, generally the farther they go. But the smaller the particles, the harder they are to find.
So I'm asking for a dimension. Use the center of the site as the center of your radius. Go out by a radius. How far is the maximum perceived radius? Is it 1 mile or 100 feet or 5 miles?
What
you,
size
you,
particles?
you name the particulate size.
Respirable particulates?
Yes.
At what level?
You name it. How far out can the particulates go? That's my only question.
Well, if you look at, one of the things that's going to be difficult is that in order to detect a level that the lab can measure, we're going to need to sample for 2 days or so at that site. So it's also difficult to identify what the silica is, the background level of
Have
silica.
you done a 12-month study at the site to determine what the particulate level of silica is?
No.
Okay, that answers my question. The next question would be, you described earlier, I think the DNR described that the silt fences had to be maintained. And if they were maintained, they work properly. Right? The silt fence has to be maintained so it works. Who's responsible for maintaining the silt fence?
We are.
And who monitors you?
DNR.
How often?
Often as they like.
How often is that? That doesn't tell me an answer.
Often as they like. I don't have an answer because there's no restrictions to how many times they can come in.
So then this is a question for the DNR. How often will you monitor their silt fences?
So as far as their discharge monitoring reports, I guess kind of twofold. One, they have to monitor water quality and submit that quarterly. And so when that comes in, we're reviewing that to determine if there's violations, if there's issues. Those are triggers for us to come and make a site visit. We are also required to make routine visits, and those can be multiple times during a permit cycle, but at least once during a permit cycle, but typically more frequent than that. If we get concerns, that triggers us then to come and investigate. So it could be multiple times.
Multiple times during the year, or during the month, or during the week?
So all the above. I mean, if we had citizens' concerns, we would have to.
So if we have a concern, we can make a request to the DNR, and then they will do a site visit?
That's correct.
And so is there a project manager assigned from the DNR that's responsible for this site, or is it a group of people from the DNR?
It would be a group of people, at least.
So not one person from the DNR is the project manager assigned to the site?
No, sir. I mean, it's just a group of people within our office and our unit.
Understood. So the next question is, what's the baseline for the noise pollution over the past 12 months? Has anything been measured?
Repeat your question, please.
So my question was, what's the baseline for the noise pollution over the past 12 months? Has anything been measured?
There has not been any reason to measure any of the questions that you just asked for the past 12 months. The past 12 months, we've not even been able to have access to all the property, to those types of things. Okay?
So the answer is no.
The answer is no.
Thank you. The next question is, I have more questions.
I have no doubt that you do, but so do the folks right behind you.
All right, my next question. Thank you. Thank you to everybody here. So I think someone mentioned that Hahn State Park, roughly 5,000 acres, is a low-light park. Has there been a light pollution study done over the past 12 months? Yes or no?
No.
I'm wrapping it up. So, has Nexgen ever paid property owners for damages?
No.
Has Nexgen ever settled a dispute with owners for damages?
Never.
That's all my questions.
What is the anticipated decimal levels of noise that's going to be produced from your factory and your machinery, and how do you expect that level to affect the surrounding residents?
Thank you for that question. So as we referenced earlier, depicted the berm along Highway 32, 30-foot berm. That will certainly help absorb a lot, if not most of the noise that could be associated with the plant. The other thing, we're going to leave a lot of vegetation to help act as a buffer. So between those two things, it should absorb a lot.
I understand it'll absorb a lot, but what is the anticipated decimal levels past that line?
It's undetermined at this point. Certainly we will make that determination or monitor that, I should say, once we get up and running. So.
Bluetooth pairing.
Test, test.
I know we've talked about the wells quite a bit, but I do have a question that I don't think has been asked yet. Now, when you initially draw water up to do your lakes for this process, how much water is going to come out at that initial filling of those lakes that you're going to have, those for your operations? How will that affect the water level at that time when you fill those lakes? So
we will be capturing rainwater from the sky rather than the ground.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So initially, to fill them, you will get rainwater to fill them. Okay, I didn't understand that. Now, for what? How much light is going to come from that plant? For residents nearby, how much light are you going to have blocking our beautiful stars?
Okay, we're back, sorry.
And for all the residents that live nearby, how much light's coming from your plant that we're going to see instead of being able to look up at the stars?
So again, it's not going to look like a stadium, okay?
You go to that slide.
I have done some research on some lighting. I will certainly display with you and tell you where I got the information from. I've used this in other places. Right there it is, I'm sorry. This is actually from the International Dark Sky Association, right? I study them a lot. What I mean, a lot. I've been at different Kansas City, St. Louis, and operated plants at night, all night long, right? So that was important, not only for the communities, but for our employees. So there's different kinds of light fixtures with hoods, light placement, different types of ballast that can help with those. So there's a lot of mitigation factors, certainly with the trees, as we mentioned, will help. Will you see a glow? Probably, yeah. But it's not going to be like seeing a ballpark lit up at night, right? We will use the different hood strategies. Again, the level of the lights in reference to the plant. We will only use enough light for safety, basically, so the workers can work safely.
Okay, well, one last thing is those 6 houses that nobody didn't care enough to put over there on that map. I live in one of those. So I feel you guys have a lot of respect for me and my neighbors because you didn't even take time to include us on there. And I think that speaks a lot for your company already.
Thank you. Thank you.
How long has Nexgen Silica been in business?
We have not produced anything as of yet.
So you filed for a business license in January of this year?
Yep.
January? Okay. Another question for DNR first.
Oh.
In either August or October of last year, y'all posted an article about how precious our aquifer is. So how can you even allow a mine to go in if our water is so precious and so delicate? What is going to be taken into that? It's your guys' words, correct? It was your article.
So I am not aware of what article you're referring to.
Bill Zimmerman. I emailed him his own article. So can he come up and answer that?
Yeah, so was it something from our website?
It's from the DNR.
Okay, I'm sorry, I do not recall exactly what article you are referring to in regards to.
She's referring to the place on the DNR's website that talks about the St. Francis Mountain groundwater province, where the DNR refers to it as being used to potential contaminants should be eliminated or monitored per the DNR website.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar with that article or exactly what it says.
Can you look at it? Go back and look at it?
Yeah, I mean,
from DNR?
yeah, I can take a look at it, or after this meeting, I can follow up with Bill exactly what that was.
On phase 1 and phase 2, you see that bottom portion down there where there's like a lake that might have been dug? That's our family farm. And I don't want this. We have 5 wells. We have a late 1700s farmhouse on our property, a 1700s graveyard, and an old cistern well. And somebody's going to tell me that they're not going to contaminate any of our stuff. We have a natural spring.
Understood. Thank you.
So, are nothing to that?
Well, I mean, I guess your question is, and so, I mean, we have regulations that protect groundwater. And so those, what's that? So we start with protecting the surface water. We have regulations that protect surface water that in hand will protect groundwater.
How is it physically protected? What are you doing to guarantee it's not going to damage her water?
Well, in regards to there's surface water standards, there's the silt fences, there's the all sediment control basins they have to use to protect surface water, which in hand will help protect the groundwater.
Okay, so business owners, who are the main business owners of Nexgen? As a business owner myself, how do you pick your business partners?
When we were picking our liberals, we partnered with R&K as a local resource for excavation and engineering. Capital Railroad will handle the transportation part of it. Those two companies formed together to form Nexgen.
Okay, so do you do background checks? Do you look at the background of previous businesses, like maybe $1.5 million bankruptcy? If he fails again, what is going to be left on us? How?
Left on me.
No, because you guys are going to file bankruptcy and leave. And then who's going to reclaim our property? Who's going to make it back? Who's going to put our deer back? Who's going to make our water good? Who's not going to take away from our environment? But was you raised on a farm? Have you ever lived on a farm? Do you guys do this stuff?
Yeah, I was raised on.
Okay, so what about our animals? What about our wildlife when you guys decide to blow up stuff? What about it? How is our cows going to do? I mean, a cow gets stressed, they die. That's our food. That is our food.
I completely understand. To answer your question, no business that we start, we're ever intending to have fail. There's not the intention here.
My name is Roger Faulkner, and I'm proud to say that I've been in business for 35 years. And my wife and I have struggled, and we have struggled through a lot of ups and downs. And she has stayed with me and my sons that I told you that I was proud of, and I have never, ever filed bankruptcy. So when people make those statements to me, you know, they are hard to take. And I don't know where anybody read that at. I don't know where anybody cased that.
Sir, you're on page that $1.5 million failure.
Failure.
It's on CaseNet, buddy.
All right, well, I tell you what we'll do. If somebody wants to come tomorrow and go on CaseNet with me and show it to me, I'd love to see it.
Can you explain the $1.5 million on CaseNet under your name?
No, ma'am, because I've never seen it.
Okay, I'm just curious.
No, that's, you know, you're good.
What about the oil company you owed money to?
The what company, ma'am? All right. Again, go ahead, sir. I apologize.
My question is a water question. When you dig a hole 100 foot deeper than, you know, in the ground, the water's going to run in. What are you going to do with that water? And how is it going to affect the wells that are within a half mile? That are, the water's coming in at 70 feet up on top of pink granite. It's all the water you got in that well. Now, if it affects that water level, I would think a well would go dry. It'd go dry. What would you do?
I'll make the attempt to try to answer that, okay? If they have a hole in the ground that's 100 foot deep,
It runs in at 70 feet. If you go any deeper, it won't. Your casing ends at 70, 80 feet.
Right.
And you won't have water. Not unless you frack the well and get a little more water in that well. Will you have any water left in it?
Okay.
Now, the silica sand is a big pile in different levels. At my place, it's 70 feet, just within eyesight the next house. He went 200 feet and had sand all the way. But at Watkins Mill, they went 1,000 feet and had 2 gallons of water per minute. And I'm sure it was probably at about 70, 80 feet.
Okay. There's a technique, a calculation that they utilize for wells called transmissivity. Okay. And it is, I'll say loosely, based on the assumption that you have uniform flow into a well. Okay. And that's really not necessarily true because sandstones are so highly variable, even on a small scale, that one zone can produce, another zone not so much, then you may have another zone below that produces. So, you know, most water wells have certain zones, as you're describing, I believe, where there's better production. Okay? So I guess part of my response to that is, you know, 100-foot depth, I don't know how far that puts them below the existing water table at that particular.
Water that far out, you know, half a mile.
Well, what I would think is that if anything, you would probably promote some sort of, you know, rainfall, if nothing else, surface run-on into the pit.
Springs on my property. They're 60 feet below, you know, below where this well is.
Okay.
Pretty close to the level of the well.
Okay.
They go dry.
It, just out of curiosity, are you located kind of to the north of this place?
I am part of the Harton.
Okay. Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, Harton Conservation Area.
Okay.
Harton.
Okay.
Well, the south side where the water's going to be so-called coming.
Okay. Yeah, I can't react to that without some information in front of me. But if you have springs, it's, in my mind, it's highly unlikely that a spring.
Well, this did affect the well, and let's say your well went dry. What could the state or Nexgen do?
Well, that sounds like more of a legal question. I don't want to answer that.
So just as Clark said, again, and part of our effort to be good neighbors, we'd love to meet with you individually. Obviously, you can come up here and ask us a question just like this. Right. I understand. But yeah, if you have those concerns at any time, please reach out. We're here. Clark's volunteered that. We'd be glad to come meet with you, sit down and discuss to make sure we don't get the answer.
Good evening. My name is Father Edward Nemeth. I'm the pastor of St. Genevieve Parish in town and also St. Philip and James River Vaz. I'm the president of the Valley Catholic Schools. I have no questions about water, wells, business practices, any of that. I feel I come to a point, and I'd like to make a statement that is not directed to you all. This all look it was well put together. You're the professionals in the mining industry. However, I think my conscience is convicted that I have to raise the question. We've answered all the hows and whys, but have we asked the question about kind of our moral culpability in engaging in this? So I have a prepared statement. And this is mainly for reflection for us as a community as we move forward. I ask for no response and certainly do not mean to come across and make anyone defensive. Tonight I stand before you as the leader of the largest religious congregation in the county of St. Genevieve. Our parish was founded in 1759 and has witnessed almost the entirety of the history of this area, from the times under the French crown to the control of the Spanish, to the Louisiana Purchase, and the inclusion into the Great American Republic. This community, perhaps more than any west of the Appalachians, has a sacred duty to preserve that which has been handed over to us. This evening we gather to discuss the issue of allowing a mine in the western part of our county. I'm a very progressive man when it comes to things of business. I believe that good business practice and good growth raises all boats. However, tonight I feel that this is an ill-gotten project. When progress is made for the profit and benefit of the few, it is an abuse of the whole. I applaud the courageous leadership of our county government and county health department in enacting this new health ordinance which will stop this project. This mining prospect represents a deal seeking to ravage our environment and landscape and take advantage of our citizens in order to profit a few in the short term at the expense of the forever. Our community recently celebrated our long-awaited status with the National Park Service and attracts more and more visitors to our beautiful county and city every week. The gift that is Fawn State Park and Pickle Springs and the entire wine garden area is a sacred trust that has been given to us to protect and preserve, as we hear in the book of Genesis. It would be an offense to God, a violation of our duty to demonstrate good stewardship of creation entrusted to us to allow this mine to take advantage of the land, which will leave an indelible mark on the landscape forever. This is not a moment to debate the value of soil, trees, and water. This is a deeper question each and every one of us has to address regarding our community. Are we a community that is for progress without any concern for the environment, tourism, or our neighbors? Are we a community who will turn its back on our citizens in order to allow a few to profit? Are we a community who will allow that which we have worked for, suffered for, bled for, be bought and used like it is a replaceable commodity? I hope we are not. If I'm wrong, then this is not the community that I have labored for and grown to love these past years. If I'm wrong, then we've lost our soul as a community, and we might as well let them strip mine Juan. If I'm wrong, then this is not the community of pioneers and settlers who ventured into the unknown to find a better life. If I'm wrong, then we should surrender all our farmland and family land in order to serve the false god of profits. If I'm wrong and we're not willing to speak up, step up, ask the hard questions, seek the hard answers, and fight this, then we're not worthy of what God has entrusted to us. And we should walk and skulk away out of here tonight in shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. I'm going to ask, we have one more person here in line. I know it's about 10 o'clock. I will mention, maybe we'll allow this question, and then as we wrap up, we'll be available over here in the corner for if anybody wants to speak to DNR on a one-on-one or group session, what have you. But we are 10 o'clock, and I know it's running late, so we can wrap this up real quick, please.
Can I get that slide pulled up with the blast radius? The
blast radius. Okay, well, the slide that had the circle on it for your blast radius. Whatever, I don't recall what it was for. Okay. But it's a good reference point for me. So, right in this area right here.
Put it down, Jim Hand.
Is where I propose to build my house this year. This clearing right here.
Okay.
Any of you that are involved in this mine, would you still proceed with building a house there if you were in my shoes? Yes, any? Then I invite you to purchase that 76 acres from me and do so, and you will be able to walk to work there. Okay. Okay, yes, real quick, please.
Yeah, I had a couple of last questions. One is, what's the revenue expected to come out of this mine?
What question is it?
Is it a...
It's not a do you have a permitting question is what I'm asking.
It was a question.
It's not a permitting question. We're here to discuss permitting.
So you're not willing to answer the question?
If it's permitting, I will.
Okay, the next one is around permitting. Are you going to fight against the ordinance that the county has passed?
We're not going to comment on that. That was sprung on us so quick. We haven't even had the chance to get our head around it, so I can't comment.
My last one is to the DNR, not to Nexgen. To the community that's asked me, what are the items that would prevent a permit from being granted?
So what we look at is for a complete application and for the operator to show that they have the right to mine the property and that they are able to bond the property, which they have. And then in the Land Reclamation Act, it does say that the director can consider all public comments in regards to making a decision of that permit. And that's a very general statement. And that's something we speak to legal counsel. Generally, it does come down to just cuts down to the complete application process. A few specific items have to be within 1,000 feet of a accredited school. We look at a violation history. If there is an existing violation history, which is this is a new company, there is not. So those are specific items that we look at under our jurisdiction within DNR in regards to the application process.
So with Nexgen, this is Nexgen Silica as a company, is that correct?
Correct.
Which is a new company. Does Nexgen as a holding company or has any company ever had a violation? This is to Nexgen. In the history of the company, it's never had a violation?
In Nexgen?
It's relevant if this company was formed by Nexgen for this purpose.
Well, it's a new company, so we don't have any violation history with these particular guys.
So back to my first question, I'm not sure I got an answer on it. What are the things that would say to the DNR, no, we will not permit for land, no, we will not permit for air, no, we will not permit for water? What are those items as triggers in the permit that would say you would not grant the permits?
I will speak in regards to the industrial mineral aspect of it. First, again, it's going through the application process. They have a complete application. They are not within 1,000 feet of accredited school. We do not have a significant violation history, and they've shown that they have the right to mine the property either because they own it or they lease it. Those are the main items that we look at.
Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, I wanted him to turn the camera off. Jimmy Hand from Ozark Steel Fabricators. Don't record me.
Sure.
Because I'm not playing your games. I don't work for you anymore. I know what you're going to do with that. Yeah,
You're-
my next question is,
You're on YouTube
they did this
anyway.
place and said you filed bankruptcy. That wasn't bankruptcy. I'm sure you know what they meant. You defaulted to a bank, correct? Your name is Roger and your wife is Marilyn. Eagle Bank. I don't believe
Give
if
him
I
a
defaulted on a $5,000 loan, pretty sure I'd still remember that. This was 1.5. You want to see it? It's got your name listed. It's here, Roger. Black and white, buddy. Because you don't want all these people right here. You don't want all these people to realize how you are.
That's, this meeting is related to the environmental permit and what we have jurisdiction over.
I have to worry about what he's going to do, and he's going to skip town, all of you are, because you don't care about any of us. And you said the health department, you're here to bring money for this St. Jim. No, you're not. Every one of you, stand here and tell me you're not here to pad your pocket.
He's done more for this town than you.
I'm not
Sit down.
to you. You're going to talk to me, buddy.
Maybe you should live next to
Okay,
him.
okay, folks,
My question is to all of you that owns Nexgen. Are you doing it to make St. Gen better, or are you doing it to pad your pocket? Simple question, yes or no?
you want to make
Well, absolutely, this is for a for-profit operation.
Exactly.
Let me finish. While this is a for-profit operation, we believe that it can be mutually beneficial to everybody.
We can't fill positions that are open now. How are you going to get 30 now?
That'll be our problem.
Right, along with others. And my vote's not on there, and I did not get a letter from you all. And I'm right there beside the tracks. And I'll be happy to let you move your kids into my house, and they can live there under all that mess. I moved there for my kids and my grandkids. You want your grandkids to live there? No. And you act like you're some preacher. That's everything you did on part. First thing you said, I'm Roger Faulkner, I'm a preacher. Guess what? The nasty letter you sent to the health department guy doesn't show me what a good preacher you are.
All right, thank you. We're going to wrap this up. As I mentioned, if anyone has any follow-up comments or questions, at least for DNR, we're going to be over here in the corner as we get things together. Thank you for attending. If you want to receive a follow-up letter following the meeting, please make sure you signed up. Thank you.